Okay, good to go. Generale Camporini, Dr. Robinson, distinguished guests from Middle East and North Africa, dear colleagues from the Allied Command for Transformation, ladies and gentlemen, I have the true pleasure and honor on behalf of my director, General Davide Re, to open these study days on space capabilities and security challenges in the Middle East and North Africa. First of all, I would like to thank you for your presence here and online. This conference is a joint activity wanted by both the Allied Command for Transformation and the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. The hub is a recent reality in the context of a decades-old Atlantic alliance and compared to the NATO Strategic Command based in Norfolk in the US, set up in 2003. As for the hub, it was created just a few years ago as a tangible outcome of the strong political will from all the member nations of the alliance. Consensus is a key word for NATO. It means that any decision which is relevant to NATO should be taken by consensus. This is to say, with the full agreement of all NATO members. There are not qualified majorities in NATO. We decide all together, and we should all agree upon a decision to make it a NATO-approved decision. In the whole NATO community, there was a consensus about the need for the alliance to substantially increase its projection in the wider southern region, beyond the Mediterranean Sea and well into the Middle East and Africa. Not a power projection, not a military deployment, but a contribution to the international community effort for stability. There was, and there still is, the need for the development of our effort, as far as understanding of regional and local dynamics are concerned, in the social, economic, political, and security domains. This is why the hub was created, and this is what the hub is doing since then. We are looking at the wider South to listen, to understand, and to learn. For the hub, there are not specific threats or risks or opportunities in the South that could have an impact only on the North, on NATO countries. For the hub, there are shared challenges, shared between our neighbors and partners in the South and us. While consensus is a key word for the understanding the nature of the Atlantic Alliance, local perspective are the key words for understanding the hub. Understanding and valorizing the local perspective is our mission in order to provide NATO with a better understanding of the challenges we share with our southern neighbors. And it is a strategic mission indeed, because a better understanding is paramount for our NATO decision makers, as they need to stick to local and regional realities. At the same time, the hub is meant to foster our reciprocal understanding. We are not a tool for NATO strategic communication. Honestly, we are not very skilled at the fine art of strategic messaging or storytelling and things like that. We work together on a daily basis, side by side, with experts and leaders from Africa and the Middle East. We discuss together, we analyze together matters of common concern, and we write together joint papers published on our website. This is our way for improving reciprocal understanding, getting rid of bias and prejudices, and working together on an equal basis. These are the reason why we are here today: to listen, to understand, to learn from you, from regional experts and leaders about a topic of common interest. Together with the Allied Command for Transformation, we reach out to you and invited you here and in this beautiful spot of Napoli. Today and tomorrow, we will listen to experts from Algeria, Kuwait, Morocco, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Tunisia, and Saudi Arabia. We will also have distinguished experts from NATO countries contributing as discussion, and we expect a lively interaction with experts and practitioners connected online. We received more than 60 requests for attending online our event. Why the topic of space capabilities is so relevant? Because space has become an important resource for security and prosperity on the planet. The Middle East economic diversification is one of the main factors for investment in space technologies and capabilities. In the Gulf in particular, space capabilities could contribute to a sustained path of prosperity beyond the current reliance on fossil energy resources. In Africa, space capabilities can promote socio-economic development. There is no doubt that data is the most precious resource in the modern economy. However, African companies can collect and apply them in a range of trade, social, and governance fields. However, due to limited connectivity, the entire Africa is a data poor region, and space resources could greatly improve the connectivity of the entire African continent. In addition to communications, Earth observation satellites can also be used to study populations, manage natural resources, and track epidemics, as well as human and natural disasters. It is also possible to meet basic social needs by increasing the availability of space assets. Africa has the youngest population in the world. When investing and expanding space-based resources and capabilities, African countries improve students' access to internet, enable distance learning, and stimulate young people's creative thinking about higher education and career paths. Complementing this positive background, plenty of opportunities, we should not forget to consider also security concerns. Space assets are relevant for both hard and soft security. They offer a clear technology advantage for military operation, but telecommunication satellites are also the basis for information competition, a key element of soft power. With this in mind, I would say that there are all the elements for a very, very interesting discussion. I am sure we all enjoyed it, and we will take advantage of this opportunity for establishing new connections among us. We have here a community of distinguished experts with different backgrounds, but with a common and strong interest in the same fascinating subject. This is the perfect combination for success. Distinguished participants, I declare open the study days. And sir, the floor is yours.
It works, yes. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I join the welcome given by the establishment of the hub to all of you. I'm very grateful for having this opportunity to address issues which do not often go on the main press. You only rarely you can hear about these issues looking at the TV or listening on the radio. But this does not mean that they are less crucial than other more popular items. I believe that they are even more crucial. I have to spend some words about the hub uh, because this has been really an invention which was created in order to face some questions and some issues which could not be faced by other instruments. I believe that the future of Europe depends more on the south than from the east. Not that the challenges from the east, namely from Russia, are, uh, are not crucial. They are, but the equation, the stability equation between NATO and Russia is rather simple. It's based on power, uh, on economic elements, but the number of variables are quite few. The relationship with the South, instead, has a much wider panorama. We can talk about demography, the economic development or underdevelopment, the dialogue between cultures. Um, this is something which is much more complicated, and I believe that our authorities, the authorities of the member countries of NATO, were extremely wise in order to decide for establishing this unique element where the dialogue can be developed without constraint on any subject. We have so many, as I said. The use of space is one of them. Well, space is something which is that does not belong to anyone, belongs to everybody, and the possibility which are offered are so great that no one can be excluded, and everybody has to do something in order to exploit these possibilities. I believe that the benefits which our societies, our countries can obtain by making a wise and proper use of space are countless. And here we are today in order to see what can happen with the needs of our countries. Um, Italy is a Mediterranean country, and we have a natural uh, view on, on the shores of this beautiful sea, and on what happens in the countries which we face after the sea. So I think it is quite natural that this meeting happens here in this beautiful town. Today at breakfast, I think that all of you have enjoyed one of the most beautiful panorama which can be seen throughout the world. And but again, we have a particular sensitivity on developing the cooperation with the countries from uh, the south, the south regions, south of NATO, because it is in our interest, it is in our DNA, I would say, given the history of Italy and in the last couple of millennia. Uh, and this is really the place where we can just focus on what is happening, what each country is doing, which are the opportunities which can come out from the cooperation of our countries. There are many initiatives. I think that they are not enough. We must have more initiatives because space is a difficult environment, is a costly environment, is an environment which requires not uh, much more than the pure will. It requires preparation, it requires education, uh, education from the very beginning, from the early schools, uh, and exchanging our experiences in this field may help, but also is the ground where agreements can be reached, so that the cost of exploiting the space can be shared, and the benefits can be shared. Uh, Space is not the property of anyone. Of course, there are countries which are more familiar with the exploitation of space because they started before, because they had the proper resources, because they had the proper preparation. But this does not mean that there is not room for all the others. Even more, I would say that the fact that someone has already taken some steps, many steps, this helps all the others to join and enjoy the benefits which the space can provide to our societies in all the fields. We will hear today and tomorrow, which are some of the benefits which we can obtain by the proper exploitation of space, in terms of more awareness, in terms of more capabilities, in terms of more benefits for our society, for our daily life. Space now is really shaping our daily life. Even uh, when you enter your car and you start a journey, space is with you because you have a nice GPS in your car which tells you where to go. And if you forget, it reminds you. So I think that space is really something which is today with us, and again we will experience that during the conference, because some of our speakers will not be here, but will be here. Will be here by technology, by the information technology, which relies on space. Uh, it, it cannot we could not have such a connection without the use of space assets. So space is with us, space can help us, and we should be wise enough to consider what can be obtained, and wise enough to do that together. I have read the uh, paper which has been prepared in order to start up this meeting, and it's amazing. I was amazed to see how many connections, how many contacts, how many projects are done together, uh, and I believe this is only the beginning, because the community of mankind should really join all its efforts in order uh, to improve our capability to exploit the benefits of space. I think that I should stop here in my opening remarks. I don't want to make a conference myself. I think it is improper for a chairman to do that. And so I will start introducing the debate of today. And we have here as an opening speech, to give our opening speech, Dr. Jana Robinson. Dr. Jana Robinson is well known in the environment. She is the managing director of the Prague Security Studies Institute, where she also is the Space Security Program Director. And previously, she held the position of Space Policy Officer in a very specific environment, which is the European External Action Service. Let me spend a couple of words about that, because this is really the beginning of a common foreign policy for Europe. And this is absolutely crucial if we want to make some step forward the integration of our countries. let's stop here. This is another conference. Um, of course, she was in the space security advisor also for the Czech Foreign Ministry. She is an elected member of the International Institute of Space Law and the International Academy of Aeronautics. She holds a PhD in the field of space security from the Charles University Faculty of Social Sciences and two master degrees. So I think that we are in extremely good hands in order to obtain a deep and well documented view on the subject we are studying today. So, Dr. Robinson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, General Camparini, for your kind introduction. General Camparini, Colonel Lancrenon, distinguished guests. First, I wish to thank the organizers, the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub, and the NATO Allied Command Transformation for inviting me to deliver remarks at this important gathering. Space domain is a major driver of national political, economic, and military power. It has become an aspiration for many emerging space nations, as well as a competition between the major space powers, the United States, China, and Russia. Space industry majors, as well as other private sector companies, have become an integral part of the space domain transformation as governments are putting forward innovative ideas for public-private partnerships, and various investors are taking keen interest in acquiring stake in space-related companies. A lot of commercial space business is publicly funded. Dr. Jill Stewart from the London School of Economics called it a hybridization of space commerce. Moreover, traditional space alliances and new space partnerships are receiving renewed attention in the strategic positioning of the major space powers. There is also evident a desire by nations to have independent access to space-based information and critical technologies. In the past few years, a number of countries in the Middle East and North Africa region have been at the forefront of investments into space infrastructure, among them Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or Algeria. Saudi Arabia is the main shareholder of Arabsat, the provider of communication and broadcast services to the MENA region, which has to date launched some 15 satellites. The United Arab Emirates has worked to become a regional hub of space-related business. This very week, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center is, for the first time, hosting the International Astronautical Congress, a prestigious international gathering aimed at providing a unique platform for experts from space agencies, industry, a space expert community. Israel was the first MENA country to have launched an interplanetary and lunar mission in 2019 that successfully made it into the moon's orbit, albeit the landing itself failed. The Emirates Mars mission, with the Hope probe, is the Arabs' first space exploration craft to Mars. UAE is also the first and so far the only MENA country to have signed the Artemis Accords, a set of principles put forth by NASA to create a safe and transparent environment which facilitates exploration, science, and commercial activities for all. As of October 2021, 14 countries have joined this shared vision, with Poland being the latest country signed up just today. In October 2020, UAE announced its own plans to land an Emirati rover on the moon by 2022, carried on a Japanese company's iSpace lander. Saudi Arabia, during its 2020 presidency of the G20, organized the first space economy leaders meeting. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt, among others, have well-established communication satellite operators that are members of the Europe, Middle East, and Africa Satellite Operators Association, (EZOA). All these activities demonstrate the transformation of the space sector in the region. Space, as a strategic sector, not only enhances political and technological standing of a country, but also supports military operations. Israel and Iran have developed domestic launch capabilities, following in the footsteps of the more established launching states. Since 1988, Israel has been launching the Shavit space launch vehicle. Iran has developed Safir and Simorgh rockets, among others. In February 2021, Iran announced it had tested for the first time a new 25-meter three-stage rocket, Suljana, that can lift up to 136 kilograms to some 499 kilometers, but can also serve as a nuclear warhead delivery vehicle. This has caused much policy concern with regard to Iran's satellite launch ambitions and intentions, especially as the Iranian military claimed that it is operated from mobile launchers. Remote sensing for intelligence purposes and satellite communication for joint capabilities are also at the forefront of investments in Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Morocco, and Egypt. Egypt's Tiba-1 military communication satellite was launched in 2019. In 2021, UAE successfully launched its Falcon I-2 remote sensing satellite. Remote sensing satellites can provide early warning on various contingencies, such as amassing of troops, which can, in turn, serve to relieve pressure from a potential crisis in making. American, European, Japanese, Chinese, and Russian companies all seek to expand space market presence in the region. Algerian Earth observation satellites ALSAT have been developed in collaboration with the UK and France. Moroccan Mohammed VI satellites were developed in collaboration with the Franco-Italian Thales Alenia Space. Qatar's Ashile telecommunication satellite was developed in collaboration with the US and Japan. Some countries are opting for closer collaboration with China and Russia. EgyptSat Earth observation satellite was developed in collaborations with Russia RSG Energia. Algeria's Alcomsat was developed by the Chinese Academy of Space Technology. Alcomsat-1 also broadcasts augmentation information on the performance of Peto satellite-based augmentation system. Israel Amos-5 satellite that was in orbit for some 4 years was developed by Russia, and it has a satellite cooperation agreement with China. The selling of Israel iHaifasport to a Chinese state-backed investor, Shanghai International Port Group, in 2015 also raised alarms in the Allied capitals as it threatened to expand Chinese surveillance in the Eastern Mediterranean, an environment already contested, among others, between EU, Turkey, Russia, the US, and Iran. In March 2021, Iran and China signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement that also includes space. Tunisia's Challenge 1 satellite was developed in collaboration with Russia, and in 2021, Tunisia's Telnet signed an agreement with Roscosmos to train a female Tunisian cosmonaut. Since 2016, Tunisia also hosts Chinese Peto Center of Excellence, and in 2018 hosted the second China-Arab Forum on the use of the Chinese Global Satellite Navigation System. The plethora of foreign partnerships in this region reflects the emphasis on building national capabilities while the countries seek the best mode of collaboration regionally, such as through the creation of the Arab Space Cooperation Group. The development of a climate monitoring satellite named 813 is a cooperation project between 12 MENA countries under this framework. Conflicts, regional rivalries, local power struggles, extremism, and instability in the various parts of the MENA region complicate space investment strategies. Violence in Iran, Libya, Syria, and Yemen caused by the protracted civil wars, the vulnerability of populations in non-oil exporting countries, the heightened economic vulnerability of the middle class caused by the failing social protection systems, and limited intergenerational mobility all contribute to regional fragmentation. Space data, products, and services have an immense role to play in mitigating the impacts of this regional instability. Applications for disaster management, environmental monitoring, agriculture, or oil sector management can support economic recovery and help build societal resilience. Communication satellites can be used for a variety of purposes, such as servicing remote oil and gas sites, or distance learning and telehealth solutions in remote areas. Satellite imagery helps monitor environmental damage and climate changes, track unsustainable land use and deforestation, enable precision farming, detecting oil spills, or revealing illegal activities. Geospatial information helps develop informed, evidence-based solutions to human security challenges. Satellite data can play a major role in ensuring human safety and human rights during natural disasters, violent conflicts, or the impacts of climate change. This is done, for example, through the translation of satellite data into information-rich maps and reports that are then shared with humanitarian organizations that provide relief on the ground in various emergencies, such as those mentioned. For example, satellite imagery analysis can show the extent of building damage to know which areas are safe to set up housing strategies for displaced groups. Satellite imagery revealed, for example, the true scale of the civilian and humanitarian impact of the renewed military offensive launched in April 2019 in Syria, including the damage and destruction of homes and vital civilian infrastructure. In short, geospatial information is used through all phases of a disaster scenario, that is, contingency planning for disaster preparedness, assessing the scope, scale, and severity within the first 3 days, assessing damage and planning response within the first 2 weeks of a crisis, and monitoring reconstruction throughout the recovery phase. Satellite systems help monitor borders, observe military activities, and help communications in open areas with no fiber optic cable infrastructure. In short, space can play an immense role in helping solve various human security risks and threats if channeled properly. The key challenge of developing the space sector for a number of the countries is time and money, as was already said. As the development cycles for space technologies are long, they tend to cost a lot, and their lifespan is increasingly short. As the countries in this region proceed with their space sector development, the proper balance between national and international, as well as security and economic interests, will always be a major consideration. To develop the space sectors of countries sustainably, they should avoid non-market predatory model of partnerships that are based on subsidized loan arrangements, creating situations of financial indebtedness on another country or sole source contracts. Rather, countries should be guided by free market principles, including disclosure, transparency, proper risk management, good corporate governance, protection of corporate reputations, and the preservation of sovereignty and independence. NATO's allies agreed at the London summit in 2019 to expand its role in human security. Events like this one are crucial in helping move this agenda forward. So with this, I would like to thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robinson. We have now some time which we can devote to a Q&A session. Well, the image which you have offered us is extremely complex with a variety of vision which we should be fully aware of. I have an initial question for you because we have experienced in the recent years in the US a lot of activity from private companies, which is not very common elsewhere. And I wonder if you can offer us some views on the benefits and the problems which stem out from the competition between public and private competition, which can be a collaboration. It must be a collaboration, but which, of course, presents, I believe, some issues, some problems. And I think that if you can tell us something about your view on the role of the private sector versus the public sector, in particular in areas like ours, like Europe, like the MENA countries, if there is some room which goes beyond the availability of funds, of money.
Thank you. I will also welcome discussion with the expert member of this audience, but I would see this not as a competition between private and sector and the governments, but rather an opportunity for partnerships. And I think we already see that this is happening in a lot of cases. In the US, we have, of course, on display the investments by companies such as SpaceX or Blue Origin or Amazon into a large scale constellations of satellites, which can serve various purposes and can also serve some of the things that I mentioned in my introductory remarks. For example, bring internet to remote areas and connect very remote parts of regions that otherwise would have not been able to do that with a ground-based infrastructure. Of course, a lot of commercial companies today already provide also defense-related services, and of course, this will continue. And even governments are looking into expansion of such collaboration in order to save money. So we see that of course the communication sector is an obvious one, but there are other areas. Of course, there is a challenge when the number of satellites will grow. For example, today there are some 4,000 operational satellites in orbit, and already over 2,000 of those satellites are commercial ones. So this is just the beginning of probably scaling up of the number of objects in orbit. And with this comes the challenge of orbit of monitoring the environment, avoiding a creation of additional space debris, which already presents a challenge for the environment, as well as how to manage the traffic in space. And this is a subject of deliberations, for example, on a national level in the United States or Europe on a unilateral basis, but also in the multilateral fora. And I think it is very important to engage all the countries that are now emerging as a new space actors to be involved in those conversations, because the first second you launch such asset, you want that asset to be protected, and you want to make sure that the investments that your country or your companies have made can be operated sustainably and without safety issues. So there are two sides of the coin, as always, with the human development into outer space. But for my personal opinion, I see this as a positive development, and I believe we can manage all these risks as they evolve.
Is there anybody in the audience ready to ask any question? I believe that the speech given by Dr. Robinson has given us a wide picture, and I think that there could be some curiosities, which of course we'll find possibly answers in the afternoon and tomorrow, but we can start exploring them now. Anyone? Please introduce yourself and be short in your question.
Thanks. So my name's Helen, and I'm a lawyer and also a consultant currently based in the UAE. So I've had the opportunity to work with space startups, spent some time at NASA, and also in relation to UAE rules on reinsurance as well. My question next actually for both General Compori and also Dr. Robinson. Both of you touched upon, I think, this idea of education, because one thing I'm, talked about emerging startups, and of course we're thinking a lot of space startups. So I'm interested in the laws and regs, but before we get there, this idea of education and the usefulness in terms of resources. So before we talk about this fully fledged new space economy with all the problems, because that's very sort of high level, we talk about grassroots, and you spoke of keywords like sustainability and climate, and of course at the expo that was the main theme, and space debris was one of the biggest themes, because if we don't deal with them on both ends, there's going to be congestion from day one. And the issue of collision avoidance being part of the idea of when you launch all these satellites up, how is that going to be managed? And clearly no one actor is going to be capable of dealing with any of it. It has to be a multilateral, albeit a joint effort to deal with these matters. So what I'm really curious, because I deal with a lot of startups, is the notion of education, and how would you embrace that? So to give you one perspective, when I work with entrepreneurs, they care less about the law. They care more about the technology and how do I get funding to get this out into space. The issues of legality, the issues of insurance, the issues of even probably security comes second to the idea of developing the technology. So if, with reference to what you say, let's say if we bring it all the way back to primary school, high school, universities, how do you think, I guess, putting space as an agenda should come into play? So obviously, from what I hear from your background, it's a very conscious decision to get involved in space and all that, but how do we bring space education as part of like geography, history, space sciences and mathematics? I'm actually really curious, because I think to bring that awareness in is probably more important now, because I feel the potential issues that you've mentioned, the two issues, space debris, space traffic management, is like the bottleneck of what is to come. And if what is to come is going to be young entrepreneurs, say 16 onwards, the 21s, 25, how do we basically educate, let's say, for the next 5 years to ensure that they will be streamlined, or be at least engaging them in the conversation before we have the issues of space collision up in space or debris. So it's a big question, but I guess it'll be useful to hear what you guys think. Thank you.
You want to start first?
Yes, sure. So I would divide this into two levels. So the government level, if you will, is that what you can observe is that those countries that operate assets are becoming also more responsible, because they see the downsides of as you say, debris, but also lack of situational awareness, and problems like that. So and we all know the UN space debris mitigation guidelines were approved after many years of deliberations between the space agency. But it was the space agencies of the major countries who went forward to the UN and said that we need something for space debris. And based and then oftentimes, of course, on a national level, I think it's the responsibility of individual governments to, let's say, put the UN debris mitigation guidelines into specific regulations for their particular needs for their space sectors, and I think this serves as a good example for space countries that want to go in space. And we talk about small ones. So, for example, Austria, before going, they were very kind of responsible actor, if you will, because before they went and launched their first university satellite, they went and adopted a space law. I think this is rather an exception than a pattern, but it serves as an example that this can be done. I mean, countries can, look into that, and they can prepare a ground for their entrepreneurs and for university to conduct space activities responsibly. But as you say, it takes education. And how is that done when in a lot of the emerging nations, actually there are no programs to educate such experts? And I think that this needs to come again, from the government's needs and support. For example, it can start also with NGOs, educating in the small groups setting. So, for example, our institute is educating students at universities through courses. We teach space courses. We also organize cyber academy, because not only space but also cyber experts are in high demand, and there are lack of young generation that are available for future cyber jobs in let's say smaller countries. So I think this is a process, but even an event like this can raise awareness about what is needed to be done. But more importantly, every entrepreneur and their governments need to understand that they need to prepare a sustainable environment for their businesses. So in a way, it is still in hands of the governments to prepare a proper environment for their businesses to to be able to go and start um, working in the space field. uh, that said, there's some issues that cannot be dealt with on the national level, and that's why everybody's saying space is global and international. So one of the big discussions right now is how do we provide space situational awareness beyond the national capabilities. This is done extensively by the United States to interested countries, but as well as commercial companies. But there will need to be more of this. There are a lot of commercial companies right now that provide space situational awareness data analysis. And again, it will be about understanding the mode and how do we share such data safely without revealing any proprietary and other information, and at the same time preserving the environment. So
Let me add some consideration from my side. I think that one of the most important words which Dr. Robinson has said is awareness. Awareness of the consequences, of the possibilities, of the opportunities. And you're right, we should start earlier in order to offer our young people perspectives so that they can shape their way of thinking in order to be prepared to be operators when they grow up. I can give an example in the aeronautical field in my country, because we have a number, not enough, but a number of high schools which are oriented on aeronautics. So a young boy, young girl, 14 years old, starts the high school, and the focus of the education is on problems in aviation. Why should our countries, our governments, not be wise enough in order to establish some initiatives? I mean, must not be spread throughout the country, but some initiatives of this kind in order to get young people and which go beyond the enthusiasm of seeing, well, space, but understanding all the consequences and increasing the awareness since the very beginning of their intellectual life. I think that your point is absolutely crucial uh, uh, because it is something which creates the uh, again the awareness that space has many facets. The legal facets which have been quoted are of the greatest importance. The strategic consequences, well, we can name many of them. But we, as you suggest, we should start much earlier so that we create a generation of young men and women who already have the rules and the instruments in order to manage this many faceted issue. We have another question over there.
Thank you. Actually, more of a comment. My name is Imran Sharaf. I'm the director of the Emirates Mars mission. I have a slight, maybe different perspective on this matter, and I agree awareness is a big element to this when it comes to actually trying to address the challenges with the space debris, and especially with emerging space nations. However, in general, if you look at emerging space nations and you go speak to the youth or the young engineers or even the professionals in these emerging space nations, they are quite aware of the space debris challenges. I think the biggest challenge here is not that, it's more of a human resources and financial resources. By human resources, I mean like having the capability and the know-how of how to be creative and innovative and coming up with solutions that addresses space debris. And again, financial, because at the end of the day, governments play a role in these space activities. They have to justify the funds. They cannot come just put huge budgets to these things. Putting more complicated technologies require more funds. So that hinders the progress. And that's why it's a little bit of a challenge to find the right balance. And I think if you ask me where the awareness should be focused on, I think the awareness should be focused on policymakers. They need to have more awareness of other nations' needs and challenges. When they come together, they sit together and come up with solutions, it's inclusive and it's a way that's to some extent considerate of each country's challenge. It's almost impossible for you to have like something that's perfect that will cover all nations. But we need at some level to go to the micro level, not just macro level. I think that's the bigger challenge than spreading awareness among, let's say, the community within each country that addresses this. I'm not saying that we should continue. And the reason why the communities in these emerging space nations are aware of these challenges is because nations have been spreading this awareness for a long time, and it's working, and we're seeing the results. In the Emirates Mars mission, for example, the mission was announced before the establishment of the UAE Space Agency. But since day one, the team at the Mohammed Baraj Space Center made it very clear, we will follow the planetary protection requirements in our Mars mission. Before even joining COSPAR, the UAE joining COSPAR, that was set since day one. I'm not sure, when did we join COSPAR? Was it 16, was it? 2016, 17, that's when we joined them. But before that, we already started on implementing this. Why? Because the team had that awareness. So this is just a comment that I thought is important to share with the team here.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you that there is this issue of getting a political attention on a high levels to the space environment. But I think we're in a good, I would say, a good period right now where the awareness has really jumped up significantly, let's say, even in comparison in the past few years. And that's because all these private actors are now, for example, going into space, and they're they're transforming the way the regulators have to think, because suddenly they're going to be facing all these issues. For example, so sometimes in a country, in a large country like the United States, the financial side for the companies, you know, that's not a consideration, but consideration is how do we don't hinder the economic development while, you know, preserving the kind of desire of the companies to go into this sector. And I think for the emerging countries, this is exactly how they need to view this, and especially like you say, with countries that have lack of financial resources, how do we enter into the business of space development without, you know, an undue indebtedness, or how can we do that sustainably? And I think you're completely right, but that I think that political awareness is fortunately, I think, on the right track in that regard. But thank you. Yeah, it's a very good comment.
Let me
Mr.
add-
Chairperson, sir, we have a question from the online community, if we have the opportunity.
Yes, yes.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Rayat. I'm the crisis management expert. I'm joining in from Istanbul, Turkey. Sorry about the background, just recovering from COVID day 7 and checking out tomorrow. My question to you, Dr. Robinson, is more on the enforcement side, using space-based assets for both law enforcement and then environmental protection. Now, all across Europe, we commonly see toxic dump of chemicals, construction rubble all over the place. And then, I mean, I'm not an environmental expert to talk about the consequences, but I would be interested in your expertise. What kind of capabilities do we have to perhaps immediately detect, you know, given remote sensing and then real-time reconnaissance and then machine learning? How could it help us? Thank you. Over.
Yes, thank you. I mean, as I mentioned, with remote sensing satellite today, you can monitor all kinds of activities, including the illegal dumping of, let's say, toxic waste, as you mentioned. So I would say that actually the availability of data, the amount of data, is not an issue. The issue is, again, you know, who is responsible for dealing with receiving the data and dealing with the consequences. And again, we then go into enforcement and regulatory challenge. So I would say on the information side, it's oftentimes not an issue. The issue is on, I guess, you know, finding a way how to deal with them. That I would say. Also with data, I mean, today I would say there is an immense amount of data already available from various remote sensing satellite. Also private companies, let's say Planet, that has become, you know, the largest commercial constellation. They provide such information. Sometimes the important part is the data analysis and the interpretation, and then the important part, putting it into the context. And again, that's again responsibilities of the enforcement sides, as you already pointed out on yourself.
My question, actually, perhaps what I was most interested in is how instantaneous, I mean, perhaps not the secret and the higher levels, but just the general level satellites. Do they provide us more real-time, instantaneous, like flashpoints or alerts, or are they just very general, collecting massive amounts of data that has to be processed? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the technology has moved forward significantly. So I wouldn't say real-time data. That's something that I'm sure the Earth remote sensing community would, you know, say that nothing exists like this. But almost, I think real-time data can exist. And again, it's about prioritizing taskings. So again, it's somebody has to prioritize certain taskings for a certain activity or information, and then you can get the data pretty quickly, the information. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
If I may add a couple of issues. One thing is observing that something wrong is happening, and another thing is convicting those who are the origin of these misbehaviors. Because something is the immediate intervention, and something else is the trial which may follow with the credibility of the evidence and the soundness of data. You raise a good point, and I think that we should be focused on this possibility because it will improve our capability to control what happens in our territories. Thank you. I think that we are on time with our program. We have now to start a first panel on space capabilities in North Africa and in the Middle East, national priorities and strategic goals. We already had a very wide panorama by Dr. Robinson, and we now could explore in more details some of the visions. And to do that, we have three very interesting panelists. They were supposed to be in presence, all of them, but one of our panelists lost his aircraft, so he will be with us virtually, probably by virtue of some satellites which realize the signal. I have the first one, who is Mrs. Imane El Kantuti, is that right? Okay. She is an aerospace engineer from the International University of Rabat. She is currently working as a project manager and system engineer in the Centre Spatial Universitaire de Grenoble in France, where she leads a group of engineer students working on the making and specialization of communication payload. Communication is one of the main area of operation in the space, and so it's something which is which we experience daily with this type of machines, and not only with that. So it is my pleasure to give her the floor in order to provide us her view. Thank you.
Thank you so much. General Camporoni, Colonel Lancrenon, sorry, distinguished delegates, thank you so much for having me. Today, I will be speaking broadly about the different challenges that we have in the Middle East, North Africa, and closer, right? Do you hear me now? Is it better? Okay, perfect. So today I will be speaking about the challenges in general, that mostly the environmental challenges that we have in the Middle East, North African, and more or less also the African region, as it is my area of expertise. So when we talk about the Middle East and North Africa and Africa as well, it is the world driest region. So there is a lot of need of water. Like recently in 2009, there was a 7-year study by NASA and the University of California, Irvine, that showed that the rate of the freshwater reserve loss in the MENA region was equivalent to the whole volume of the Dead Sea. Also, like for the North Africa, which is in Africa, Africa is it is the most impacted continent by the climate change problems, and also it is for the Middle East and the North Africa are like the two youngest regions of the world, because more than 60% of like the populations is under 25 years old. So these are like the future of the planet. So in the Middle East and North Africa, there is a lot of problems, such as like a lot of biodiversity damages and loss due to oil spills, to droughts, desertification everywhere from Morocco to Iran, not so much forests, erosion, a lot of damages due to oil spills, and a lot of coastal damages. For example, like the annual percentage of the freshwater withdrawal from the internal resources, like internal fresh resources, are quite important. Like we could see, like sometimes it's 6,000%, for example, for Egypt, from the withdrawal. So they need more than they have. Also for Bahrain, it's around like 4,000. Also, another thing is like urbanization and the connectivity to the world. The Middle East and North African region is one of the most urbanized nations. There are like nations like such as Kuwait. They're almost 100% urbanized. Everyone is in cities and everything. But other places such as like Egypt, they are only 42.9% urbanized. So a lot of people live in remote areas, and we find that also in Morocco. So those places need a lot of connectivity, mostly through satellites communication. Sometimes they need also access to medical support, and this can be also done through telemedicine, for example. And also, as those two regions are the youngest in the world, we need to focus a little bit on the youth. How can we do that? Is through education, through giving the floor to the youth, the students from universities, to have a certain space culture or like culture in general. And we can see that, for example, for Jordan, that has launched its first CubeSat, Kuwait, for example, and also like we see a lot of countries that started doing a lot of efforts by creating airspace programs. Morocco, I come from one in Morocco. Egypt is one of the leading countries. Algeria as well, and the UAE, of course. Israel, Iran also have a lot of capacities. And we can see also that there started to do a lot of international cooperations to create those programs. For example, for like Morocco, it's aerospace engineering curriculum is in partnership with Georgia Tech and the Mississippi State University, for example. So for the space capabilities in the Middle East and North African region, we see that more and more countries are trying to be or are becoming spacefaring. We can see like UAE puts in a very big very big budgets into it, like in the private and governmental sector. Saudi Arabia with Arabsat, Iran, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Qatar, and Tunisia lately. So one of the things that I could see from like the budget allocated is like the countries with bigger GDPs are directly invested more in the space industry. So for example, like Saudi Arabia has the highest GDP, so they are more and more involved in the industry, and then Emirates and Israel, Egypt as well. And also the fact that also there are like Israel and Iran have the full space orbital launch capabilities locally, because most of the other countries mostly need do a lot of downstream applications, which are like the data. Upstream are less. There are I won't say less expertise, but less initiatives in that. So there's a lot of cooperations. For example, for Morocco, like the two satellites were made with Italy and France, Algeria with France, the UK, and China, and so we see a lot of technology transfer. And now I'm gonna be talking a little bit about Morocco and its space capabilities. Like our main authority is CRTS, Centre Royal de Télédétection Spatiale, which is for remote sensing, that was founded in 1989, so it's quite early. The country have joined the United Nations Outer Space Affairs Office in 1961. It's one of the first countries to do so. We have 3 satellites for now. Like we had 3 satellites. We were the third nation to launch a satellite in Africa after Egypt and South Africa. And then 2 other Earth observation satellites, Mohammed 6A and Mohammed 6B, which are about like Earth observation, because one of the main expertises of the center is collect this data and treat it, because we have more and more problems with desertification and more problems with deforestation and erosion, also like for security concerns in borders, and also like a lot of immigration, because Morocco is one of the big routes for illegal immigration to Europe. So to be able to monitor like that human rights are respected, we need to locate where and follow how it can be done. And also, the country is really involved in renewable energies and climate change. So the last project that they signed in was to take part in the Space Climate Observatory with the CNES. And they will be launching soon a satellite. I mean, within this project, a satellite to monitor the water irrigation, because agriculture is one of the main economies of the country. A lot of other MENA countries have less agricultural spaces, arable places than it is in Morocco, and it is one of also the main issues with the climate change. So this needs to be monitored, and space capabilities and Earth observation as one of the main ways to track everything, and also like to be able to give the data to the people that might act or do a lot of policy. So one of the main things that can be done is to actually involve everyone, um, um, scholars, policymakers, industrials, students, all together into working around the problematic. So it's like the, wh- the whole route from the problem to the solution needs to be much more coordinated, and we should have better strategies. So that's why it's always good to try to develop the capacities, like starting from how to make a satellite with students, starting from, for example, from CubeSats that are like less and less, that cost less and less, and that can be done developed by off-the-shelf components, for example, even if they have less lifespan than the bigger satellites. But when you involve like students, you're forming future leaders, the future decision makers into having that local expertise. And also one of the good strategies is through cooperation, because all the countries are not on the same level of expertise. Some have more expertise in making in the making, and also some others have more expertise in treating the data. But also like the local challenges are more known by the local authorities. So just to try to be less to try to have less dependence to international actors will only be good for everyone to achieve that social economic development. Thank you so much.
Thank you also for staying within reasonable time limits. Very interesting. Now I go directly to our online panelist, Dr. Jamal Darfilal. Good morning. Uh, he graduated from the University of Tlemcen in 2010 in computer-aided mechanical engineering. And after gaining a master's degree in energetic engineering and environment in 2012, he began a research career in the university where he developed applied thermal activities, which led him to become a specialist in space propulsion systems and working on the main programs of the Algerian Space Institute. It is my pleasure to give you the floor, asking you to stay within 10 minutes for your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to join you in this big event. Thank you very much, Mr. Camporini. So I will give you in my presentation an overview about the Algerian space program. I will share with you some presentation. So I start. Can you see the presentation, please? Hello. Can you see the presentation?
It's okay. It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So first, I will start with the content. I will start with the National Space Program of Algeria, and then I will move to space systems actually existing and the planned ones. And then I will move to the different institutional and organization framework in Algeria, and then the international cooperation we have with different institutions. So first, I will start with
presentation mode, please.
Oops,
Can you go to presentation? Okay, yes.
Yeah, sorry. So first, I will start with the National Space Program called NSP. It is the governmental reference for and the document describing the national strategy of Algeria. So the objective of the NSP divided to two main objectives. Sorry, the first is the overall impact. The objectives are to reinforcing national sovereignty and sustainable development of different sectors in Algeria. And the main objective is to master space technology in different aspects. The second objective is a specific impact, which is improving the efficiency of natural resource and management of natural disasters and major risks. And then setting up a national technological capability and mastering of space application. I mean to train and to prepare some human potential and know exactly how space systems are made and how it is designed. And in general, promoting the use of space technology in Algeria. So the National Space Program covers 6 objectives. The first one is to build our local space systems and to strengthen our scientific potential in space industry in general. And it is made to cooperate with more than 21 ministerial departments in different activities. And of course, the objective is to strengthen our research area in different space fields. And the second, the objective we have, one of the objectives we have is to train more than 500 engineers and researchers and have more than 100 projects in space in general, and to create some institution dedicated for these applications. So I will start with some space system already made within the cooperation with some international institutions. I will start with ALSAT-1. It is our first satellite made with SSTL, in cooperation with SSTL. The resolution of this satellite is 32 meters. This satellite, we had the information during more than 10 years in orbit, and the operation of the satellite were done locally in Algeria. And we have the two satellites we made with Airbus, ALSAT-2A and ALSAT-2B. These satellites were made to be used as constellation. It is a medium, we can tell high resolution. It is a 2.5 meter monochromatic resolution. The first one was launched in 2010, and second one, which was totally integrated in Algeria, was launched in 2016. Here is the ALSAT-1B. It is a completion of the mission of ALSAT-1. This satellite was launched in 2016. And we have this year, the 5th year of its in orbit, in orbit, sorry. So these space systems are generally made for mapping our resource, our natural resource, or planning our cities, or for example, managing natural problems like firings or something like that, and to support decision for defense and security, and support the conception, setting, and following up the territory plans and the programs made by the government. So the main activities of our operational institution, where we receive data from these satellites, is to mapping and cadastre of the Algerian territory, and use the information to explore our natural resources like oil or means, and to manage water resources, and to improve and to have more efficiency of using territories for agriculture, and of course controlling and make better the environment and controlling natural risks, and for other applications. Alcomsat is a satellite made with China. It is a communication satellite. The objective for doing this satellite is to have the autonomy in communications, and for response to national needs in communication, telephony, broadcasting, education, e-health, which is a new activity, and e-education, of course. We are also we have some lateral cooperations. The first one is a space system called ARMC. It is an African resource management satellite constellation, which is this project, sorry, is initiated by Algeria, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa for the management of the African resource and environment. We have also initiated a space program called ASEU. It is an Arab satellite constellation for Earth observations. So here is a map of the plans of our movement or our development in space activity. So first we start with ALSAT-1, sorry. This satellite was first launched in 2002. Then we moved to the local integration of the satellites at our local infrastructures. We made that with ALSAT-1B and ALSAT-2B. And then we are in the third phase, which is making locally part of the satellites. So here is the organization linked to Algerian Space Agency. So the first one is CTS, Space Technique Center, which is dedicated for training and for sharing the technology and the information with the universities and with the research institutions. We have also CDS, where I'm actually working. It is the Satellite Development Center, dedicated to integrate, to develop, to make satellites. We have also CEST. This is a communication system operations center for the satellite Alcomsat. And we have also Space Application Center, which is dedicated for reading and using the information received from our satellites. And we have some high schools for space technology located also here in the west of the country in Algeria. We have also some associated entities. For example, EDTAS. It is some doctoral schools where we train and we prepare next generation to be incorporated in space activities. We have also some local partners in different industry. So it is a kind of ecosystem we made to make our our systems locally. So I will give you an overview about the CDS. It is a center dedicated for to assembly, integrate, and test satellite for up to 1,000 kilogram without propellant. So there we had till now two main activities, which is the integration of ALSAT 1B and integration of ALSAT 2B. We have there different infrastructure we need for integrating satellite from clean rooms, from laboratories, and so on. So I will give you also an overview about a laboratory, the laboratory I'm actually leading. So it is the Satellite Space Propulsion Laboratory. So it is dedicated to make small satellite propulsion systems. We had actually two axes. We make some systems based on cold gas technology, and some systems based on chemical green propulsion, like HTP, high test peroxide. So here is some systems we made locally. So you can see in the pictures, a thruster, 10 Newton thruster, small thruster, and small tanks, 2-3 liter tanks. We make also different activities at our laboratory, like integration of test stands and infrastructure we need for testing our systems we made. We have also some data acquisition systems and electronics related to our activity. Yeah. We do different activities at this laboratory. For example, making space propulsion controlled cards. So here is a testing phase we did there in the laboratory. We make also some small parts using some small lathes, and some small equipments. We participated also for the integration of satellite as a propulsion team. So here it is an activity we did in India to fill our tank with the propellant. We do some measurement too in our laboratory. So we have some systems to check the conformity of our system we developed locally. So now I moved for the cooperation. So Algerian Space Agency in general has bilateral cooperation with different institutions like UK Space Agency or CNES in France or Airbus, Roscosmos from Russia, and Indian ISRO company, institution, sorry. Yeah, so I just share with you this picture, which is a tank we make locally. It was really hard to make it, but we did it. Our objective now, as I mentioned in the starting of the presentation, is to make locally our systems. And this is an example of what we made. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any question, I'm happy to reply.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for your timing, very precise. From my side, one single question. You listed the cooperation in one of your last slides. Do you foresee any possibility of cooperating also with the elements such as the European Space Agency, or you prefer to talk bilaterally?
Yes, I think so. So I think actually Algerian Space Agency try to make different kinds of cooperation with different institutions. And I think there is a lot of discussion with ESA. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to our third panelist, who is already sitting at the table. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Omran Sharaf. He's a project director of the Emirates Mars mission. So you are looking very far away from here. In the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. He and his team are responsible for developing, launching, and operating the HOPE probe, which is the spacecraft of the mission. An experienced electronics and system engineer, he trained in the US and in Korea. He was responsible for developing and implementing the command and data handling subsystem for the Dubai Sat-1 high resolution low Earth orbit imaging satellite. And he also added the development of the same subsystem for the Dubai Sat-2, as long as being the system engineer in that project. So we are looking forward to your experience in these very specific fields. Again, for you, if you can stay within 10 minutes, I would be grateful.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor. If you guys allow me, I would like to speak actually, I would like to use the Emirates Mars mission maybe as a story to summarize the UAE space program. And to some extent, maybe even highlight some of the challenges that we have within our space program, but also probably regionally, because some of these challenges are shared with different nations also here, like within the Middle East. The Emirates Mars mission was announced by the UAE government in the summer of 2014. And the main reason behind it was to send, not to reach Mars, but for it to be a tool for much bigger objectives, objectives that are linked to our national priorities. One of the first requirements that was given to the team by the Prime Minister just before the mission was announced was that we need to reach Mars before the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the UAE. That's basically the 2nd of December, 2021. So in 2014 till 2021, we literally had only 6 years to deliver a mission. Because the opportunity to launch to Mars comes once every 2 years. So we'll have to launch by 2020 to be able to reach Mars before the 2nd of December 2021. And why was that the reason? Is to send a very strong message to the Emirati youth, the youth in the UAE, to go into STEM. Why STEM? Because it's something important. The UAE wanted to create an advanced science and technology sector that will support the establishment of a creative, innovative, and a competitive knowledge-based economy. So it's about the future of our economy, about the post-oil economy. To do that, we need to have scientists. The country has invested a lot in building engineering capabilities since its establishment in 1971. However, scientists had very limited career path. Universities didn't offer a lot of scientific programs. So the UAE government wanted to change that. And one of the requirements they put on us was that your job is not just to lead this mission and to make this mission successfully reach Mars. You as a team will also lead that disruptive impact that we'd like to see in multiple sectors that are critical for the future of our economy. Academic sector, industrial sector, and all other sectors. So it's about changing that mindset of the Emiratis, a cultural shift when it comes to R&D. So that's why the UAE looked at Mars. And there's another issue, our national challenges. The UAE government believes that through having a strong science and technology sector, and through having the scientists who come up with new discoveries and the engineers who take those discoveries and turn them into products, they can find solutions for issues such as water security and food security. Obviously, that's not going to happen through a mission, but that's a catalyst to get the ball rolling. So to establish the science base. Before the Emirates Mars mission, we did not have a federal entity in charge of space. But because of the Emirates Mars mission, a federal entity was established, the UAE Space Agency. Because of the Emirates Mars mission, a science council was established in the UAE. Because of the Emirates Mars mission, a ministry for advanced science and technology was established. And one of the things that even led to the establishment of a dedicated ministry for industries. Universities that didn't have any science programs started scientific programs or science programs because of the Emirates Mars mission. Students who were studying finance, international relations, shifted majors into math, chemistry, and physics because of the Emirates Mars mission. So we saw that impact. That's when it comes to the UAE. The other side to this, why the UAE was very eager to reach Mars before its 50th anniversary, is to send a message to the Arab youth, to the Arab countries. In 2014, 13 and 14, the region was going through its toughest times. If you remember, during the Arab Spring and things that were happening, you had a region that has more than 100 million youth in it, 100 million youth, a lot of potential. We're unfortunately either leaving the region, which does not help in stabilizing the region, which is critical for the future of the UAE, to have a stable region. And the other thing is also, the other groups, were, if the ones who didn't leave, were unfortunately some of them joining the wrong groups and being creative and innovative in the wrong ways. So the message that the UAE wanted to send to the Arab youth, to the Arab countries, is that if a young nation like the UAE is able to reach Mars in less than 50 years, a nation that has more than 200 nationalities living in it, different backgrounds, different faith, coexisting together, and every single person in the UAE, regardless of their citizenship, contributed in putting UAE's name around Mars, then you can do much more given your history. A region that was more than 800 years ago a symbol of coexistence. We used to generate knowledge. Scientists from the region came up with significant discoveries, and those scientists were not all from the same backgrounds. They came from different backgrounds, but they all contributed in building the region. The moment we stopped accepting differences, the moment we stopped accepting coexistence, the moment we stopped generating knowledge, we started moving backward as a region. So that's a reminder to the Arab youth. So that's a soft aspect of the mission that the UAE wanted. And this is why it was called the Hope Probe. Not hope for the Emiratis, but hope for the Arabs also. And then one of the requirements that was given to us also by the Prime Minister himself was basically, he said, build it, don't buy it. Don't start from scratch. Learn from others. And this is why we worked with 3 universities in the US, University of Colorado at Boulder, Arizona State University, and University of California. Our main partners were University of Colorado at Boulder to deliver the mission. 450 people worked on the mission. 200 Emiratis, 150 from our knowledge transfer partners, the universities, and 100 subcontractors from around the world. All worked under one identity, which is the Emirates Mars mission, and delivered the mission in 6 years, which is very unusual. Missions like this usually require 10 to 12 years. And the budget was very strict, and they told us you do not have open budget. The mission was delivered for $200 million, which is, relatively speaking, also quite cheap compared to other missions. Why we were able to do that is because we learned from others. We didn't start from scratch. Why did we learn from that? Is because the UAE was very clear since day one that they wanted to come up with a new model of developing such missions. And this was said clear to us by the government. For us, this is not a space race, it's a space collaboration. We need to come up with an Emirati model of doing things that we can actually share with the rest of the world for such projects to be conducted in a more efficient and effective way. And the best way to do that is through collaboration. So this were fundamental elements of the MS Mars mission. And the third requirement that was given to us also, actually the fourth, because the third was actually what I mentioned earlier, was that you will have to lead the efforts of getting the ball rolling or being a catalyst for establishing an advanced science technology sector with the UAE. The fourth one was basically the science that we'll be doing, it has to be novel. And it will be shared with everyone with no restrictions. Because this is about serving humanity. It's part of building that culture among the Emirati youth, among our science community in the UAE, that focuses on the bigger picture that is sometimes beyond the UAE, more about humanity. So when it comes to the UAE, our space program is basically, it's about our national priorities. And our national priorities are basically our economy, quality of life of the population of the UAE, and to have the highest quality of life, to do that, and the environment. And to address all that, we need to have our science and technology sector that is capable to innovate and be creative. That's customized to our needs. The other aspect to this mission also, and our space program in general, is that, let's be honest, science technology is part of everything now. Everything, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economy, whether it's business, everything. We had a big challenge sometimes when it comes to achieving certain foreign policy objectives or strategic objectives. The reason behind that is, again, it's very simple. Number one, trust, because with space, with technology, there is sensitive technology, and it's not easy to build trust. And the second aspect is, excuse my honesty, unfortunately, countries look at us as a bank sometimes. You know, so you pay for it, we build it, and that's not sustainable for us. There are countries around the world who have much more resources than the UAE, significantly much more resources. They're not just in the Middle East, outside of the Middle East. However, we have our way of managing our resources and trying to be efficient and effective in doing so. So, and we would like that perception to change also. So with having missions like this, with creating scientists who are capable to work with the international community, that builds transparency. That gives insight to nations that want to work with us, because scientists have to be transparent. This is one of the basic principles of the science work. You need to be open about your knowledge. You need to share it. You need to peer review it. So having missions like this starts building the bridges between nations, gives us insight into other countries' worries, and give other countries insight into our capability. And that transparency helps discussions, helps moving forward and highlighting these challenges and either solve them or putting certain precautions around it that contain those challenges. So everything I mentioned here, again, it's not going to happen through a mission. This mission is a catalyst, and the space program in the UAE is a tool for these objectives. And with this, I guess I would like to give the mic back.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, highlighting also the importance for the political, the social, the nation life of such a program. This is a very interesting point of view. Now we can break for 15 minutes in order to stretch our legs and take a coffee if we like. Then we will be back here at 11:30. 11:30, I think, yes. 11:30, in order to start our discussion. We will have our panelists who will be available for answering your questions and for arguing with you. So far, I am very satisfied of the content which has been displayed, and I look forward for the continuation. So see you in 15 minutes. A while for our coffee break, which was quite pleasant with these pastries, which are typical of Naples. Thank you for being back. Now we can start a short discussion with our panelists, asking questions and offering new ideas. Is there anyone in the audience who likes to make some observation? I have just to be the icebreaker. I have an observation to the last presentation because I was quite impressed by the strategic vision which was offered, and I wonder whether this strategic vision is coming directly from the top of the government, or if you had to, in a way, educate them in order to provide the support you are experiencing.
So thank you for the question, actually. And I have to say, I mean, it's mainly the high level things that I mentioned earlier when talking about inspiring Emirati youth and the Arab youth and the economy and the environmental challenges that came from the Prime Minister himself. Like, he sat with us, he gave us his direction, he was very clear about it. But then also, because before the Mars missions, there were other missions that we had, was Earth observation things. So there was always a kind of a contact or a communication between us and him on different things that's related to space and other nations, what they're doing. So it's a combination of both, I would like to say. So all that kind of feedback that we gave, the discussions that we had in the past, created that vision and the idea of how to do things. But again, the fact that the leadership in the UAE is very close to the citizens was a key factor also in enabling this, making it happen. I have to say, the mission was executed in a non-traditional way. The spacecraft was designed in a non-traditional way. Usually such spacecrafts are built using triple redundancy or dual redundancy. We went with selective redundancy because we had to balance between complexity, which will make testing much more difficult, and simplicity, which will give us more time for testing given the limited time frame and the limited budget that we had. And again, this kind of discussion had to happen with the stakeholders, like the Prime Minister. He was aware. We had to tell him, like, we have 6 years, other nations had 12. We have only $200 million. Other nations have 3 times the budget sometimes. So we will have to take this approach. And he's like, you're the technical team, and you got our support.
Oh, this is important because, of course, we need good armies, but we need good generals. If we miss the generals, a good army cannot do much. But if a general is an extremely good general, but with no army, then he's going to fail. And this has to do also with the education issue, because you have to prepare the troops to man the army.
Good morning. Yes, it's a question for all three of you, if you are able to provide me your views on that. Space is a global dimension domain. It's common to all. You have stressed very much the issue of collaboration, but what I've seen is collaboration with stakeholders external to the area. Is there any room, not now possibly, in the near future, in the long future, how do you see collaboration among parties in the region? I don't mean across the whole region. Can be bilateral, can be multilateral, focused on one area, focused on another area. How do you see that happening? Because I see in other areas in the globe that this is happening because of human costs, of financial costs, and shared experience that saves time and money, according to some desires from our governments. So do you see room for collaboration, and you see initiatives in that particular regard happening in the near, medium, or long term? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I can start answering that question. Well, for the moment, in Morocco, as far as I know, that we started looking for cooperations, mostly with the UAE, for example, because I mean they are the leaders of the region in the space expertise now. Even if Morocco was one of the first spacefaring countries in the region. But it's really important to think about this cooperation inside of the region, even just like to decentralize a lot of things, such as like, for example, Morocco can make, not for the moment that we don't really have all the capacity or the full capacity to make the satellites. So maybe if we can, for example, use the facilities of other countries and to do a sort of cooperation this way, for example, especially like if the UAE are much more qualified to do that. So, and also second thing is like the strategy, to have a sort of transfer of this strategy. Like now the approach of the UAE is more of a new space approach, because I am working in the new space industry. So we're trying to do of everything we can do, like in the least time and with the least resources we have. And I'm working in the university, which is much harder to manage, especially like the resources, the human resources and everything. So to find like, to learn from the mistakes of the others, and to actually have this view and have like a sort of just like events like this, where we talk about this is what we did, this is what we shouldn't do, and to create a whole vision, a whole strategy, and to have someone to monitor it. Like, I don't know, maybe the creation of an Arab space agency, for example. Why not? I mean, Africa is doing this, and it will have like our agency, the African Space Agency, inaugurated in 2022 in Qahira, in Cairo, in Egypt. So let's just like, it's good. Now for the moment we're sort of trying to cooperate with the internationals like Europe, US, Japan, China, because they were leading, so they have the expertise. But I hope that, and we started doing it, that with UAE, for example, and Egypt, to be more and more self-sufficient, and also like to help each other, because not everyone is in the same stage for the moment. But like short term, I can see that happening in the next 10 years, not days, years. So yeah, thank you.
don't know if, should I go ahead or online? Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead. Thank you for the question. I mean, it's a really good question, actually. And then as fairly highlighted, yeah, it seems all the cooperation is focused with East and West, nothing within. But then I would like to highlight, as was even mentioned by Dr. Robinson earlier today, is that, you know, there's that the Arab Space Cooperation Group that was being established, and that's led by the UAE. And the main sole purpose of that is actually towards that vision, to start, helping other nations in the region, building their space capabilities to serve the region and again, humanity, the civilian programs to be more cooperative and working together. And the UAE is leading that effort. It's still at the beginning, early phase, but work is ongoing. There's also another aspect to it, if you think about it, especially for us in the UAE. The first phase of our space program, I'm talking about like the proper space program, which started in 2006, till I would say February of this year, when we reached Mars, the UAE reached Mars. That phase focused mainly on gaining knowledge and bringing knowledge to the UAE. So maybe that distracted us at the beginning from having focused on working with others in the region, maybe, and focus more on working with the East and the West, because it was more about knowledge transfer, know-how, and things like this. With the announcement of the new mission, I don't know if you heard about it, the visit to the asteroid belt and the flyby Venus and landing on the last asteroid we'll be visiting, which was announced about 4 weeks ago. That is an important milestone in the history of UAE space program, because that's our transition point now. We are shifting from getting knowledge to actually taking that knowledge as a space sector and transferring it to the academic sector in the UAE and to the private sector in the UAE. And hopefully another aspect within it will come to not just transferring knowledge to let's say the region itself, but also other international players. But it's part of that long journey, which will take a little bit of time.
I see a hand over there.
So, hi, this is Fatma, and I'm from the UAE Space Agency. I would like to add to what Imran was mentioning. As he mentioned, youth empowerment is very important for us in the UAE. And one of the programs that I would like to highlight is the Space Arab Pioneers Program, where we give opportunity for the Arab youth to join us in the UAE in the development of the space sector. They are giving a chance to improve their, let me say, knowledge in the sector. They're given a chance to participate in the development of a space mission or space project. So this is one of the efforts that's being led by the UAE. Another program that was just mentioned or just announced last week is the Space Analytics Program. So enabling the economy and enabling the flourishing of the sector is very important for us in the UAE. We announced a program where we provide an opportunity for space companies to come into the UAE and demonstrate their space capability and the development of projects where they participate in solving international challenges. And the current focus now is in the area of food security and climate change. The UAE will sponsor the development of the selected projects. So, and of course, the participation is open for companies, whether coming from the Middle East or from an international establishment. So these are also additions to what Imran just mentioned, and I would like to highlight that. Thanks.
Thank you, Fatma, for that. Thank you.
Yes.
Intervention?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So for Algeria, it is the same thing. Algeria, as you know, is totally integrated with its region. So as I mentioned in my presentation, Algeria initiated a lot of region projects. The first one was an Arabic constellation of satellites, and we are still working on that. And in the other side, Algeria initiated some kind of constellation cooperation with African countries. And we are also working on that. I just want to mention that Algeria is actually member of DMC cooperation. It is an organization, European organization, to follow natural problems and something like that. And also I want to mention that Algeria received periodically delegations from different countries and share its knowledge and its capability with the region, country, and over the world. Yeah.
Thank you. I believe that this is really a critical issue because cooperation in specific scientific fields may be the trigger to ease relationship between countries. And the possibility to exploit different capabilities should be used in order to have a more a wider political view. I understand this is difficult because the relationship between countries is not something which you can solve overnight. There are problems which were long-standing. Nevertheless, we have the evidence that scientists in the world tend to be a group of their own kind, where differences in passports count less than in other fields.
Sure.
So I think we should, in a way, favor this thinking. It may help a better coexistence and a better world. Please go ahead.
Hi, Helen here. So alluding to collaboration and potential opportunities within the region, what do you think would be maybe some of the challenges for the concept of a sort of maybe sort of, you know, Arab Space Agency? Because on the topic of innovation, it's very exciting, and working with entrepreneurs, you know, there are initiatives, let's say in Egypt and you know Morocco and everything, and I'm really fascinated by the idea. Primarily, I'll give you a really good example. So I'm a lawyer, and I'm also an advocate at the DIFC courts. And at the time, about 2 years ago, I connected a colleague, Shaji, Dr. Shaji from the UAE Space Agency with the DIFC courts. And I remember 2 years ago having a conversation talking about the space courts, so the idea of how do we resolve disputes in the future, etc. So a year and a half later, you know, the courts launched this initiative, and I half joke, I'm the first one to present the idea, last one to know about it, but I'm just so happy because ideas and initiatives can happen in the UAE, you know, having lived there for 3 years. So I'm really excited by the potential here, but then also, of course, with with opportunities, also responsibility, and then how I guess you envisage this playing out, knowing full well, you know, your emphasis on the Arab youth and about the younger generation. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I mean, it's a good question, and so when it comes to the region, I think there's, I mean, at the end of the day, as a UAE, we'll do everything we can to be inclusive of countries in the region, of the youth in the region, and also, I mean, of countries globally. But then there are certain things that we cannot, it's not out of our hand. You know, things are internal that needs to be sorted out. We hope through them looking at the UAE as a case study will help them move forward in certain ways. If I may use an example, for example, in early 2000, The UAE was one of the first countries in the region to open up its market, its real estate market for foreign investors to buy real estate, because it used to be very restrictive before. And to start creating like free zones and this approach of transforming the nation into a more developed nation. There's a lot of skepticism and criticism for the approach taken by the UAE, especially when it comes to the identity of the nation, losing your identity, you're selling your nation, things like this. 10 years later, we see other countries in the region doing similar things. And sometimes you have to lead the effort, show the results, make others comfortable, and see the benefit of such things for them to take that approach. They will have to do it on their own. We will support, we will give them the support they need, and we did that in the past in other sectors. And we hope the same would happen here. So when it comes to the details, so there is the big challenges, yes. The number one thing, they need to have a vision for the space program. They need to have a vision for the space sector. Why are they going to space? This has to be, a story needs to be said behind that. And it's a story that needs to be very strong, that not just convinces the stakeholders in the government, but also the public. Because you need to have the public behind you to have a thriving space program.
Okay, so to add up, okay, so sometimes that's true that in the region, a lot of countries like internally have a lot of conflicts that are bigger than like in the politics of the country are bigger than any other cause. This is true. We have sadly these problems either in the MENA region or even in Africa. So maybe if it's so, maybe if we create a sort of legal frame with like let's say that the UAE is the holder of this legal framework, just like to have a sort of legal team or policy making team that would at least ease those, not say ease those tensions, but at least try to monitor everything going on, because sometimes it's really for the moment it's really critical to talk about certain political issues and certain between countries. Sometimes it's taboo to talk about it. So if we create a sort of framework where we only talk about science, technology, STEM, and nothing else, we need policy, of course, but like spaces for all. Like UNOSA is doing his job and on making the space like peaceful. So maybe if we try to have like very, very exact and concise and legal framework for those countries to cooperate with each other, to be able to use each other's facilities. I mean, we see that, for example, for the International Space Station between the US and Russia. Like, who said that, like back then, who said that, for example, in 30 or 40 years, there will be like cosmonauts and astronauts from NASA working together and being together 400 kilometers from in the altitude of the Earth and working together towards something magnificent, or like towards making scientific discoveries and doing what they're doing. And now they're the only, I mean, until recently, Russia was the only one launching humans into the ISS. So this is a very inspiring for me, like as a Moroccan national, as an Arab, as an African. This is something that really inspires me, and I say maybe like STEM field, maybe a sort of scene where we can try to surpass our differences and be together. As like it happened before, I hope it's going to happen after, but like it happened before, like between the US and Russia. So, so yeah, thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, just something that was mentioned by Imana. I'd just like to build on it, actually, and this is an opinion, just my opinion on this matter. One of the challenges also that's behind it, maybe that we hope that other nations within the region just look at it differently, is that I love the military, I respect them, you know, honestly. But the problem, like when they look at the space, they just look at it from the military point of view. The UAE, we have our military activities, but that's not part of our space program. Our space program is a civilian space program. The military has operational needs, short-term and mid-term needs, and they have their own ways of procuring systems and for their needs, but they're not the drivers, or our space program is not a military space program. In other nations, I don't know, the approach is more of the military has the biggest say, has a role, and that sometimes hinders the progress, and sometimes, I mean, because of the nature of it, I mean, at the military, you need to be more conservative, you need to be more secretive, you need to be more risk averse when it comes to developing a system. You know, so I have an operational need, a strategic need. I need to get it. I don't have time to do R&D and wait until I get the system. It's a different mindset. It's a different mentality. So this sometimes also causes. So having good understanding of that and separating between these two programs and giving a priority to a civilian program will definitely expedite such collaboration.
Thank you. This is a very interesting observation because it's the reality. Although I think that Italy has something to offer in this field, because you may be aware that we have a military program and we have the space agency, which is linked to the ESA. The cooperation between our civilian space agency and the military is totally transparent and without anyone trying to take the upper hand. I mean, we are both aware that the space is an environment which can be exploited for many purposes, for military purposes or for civilian purposes. It's a dual use commodity. And being a dual commodity, we can help each other. Just to give you an example, Italy decided some years ago for a program of Earth observation satellites, the Cosmos SkyMed, which was born out of a military requirement, which was immediately taken up by the civilian agency, and of course it introduced some modification in order to make it compatible. The program has been very successful. 4 satellites are in orbit and they provide the coverage which is precious. By the way, it is also a very successful commercial initiative, because apparently the product is very good, and many countries are buying the images and the data which come out from this program. But it is the evidence that it is not impossible to put together military needs with civilian needs, of course, with the due firewalls. But this is not an impediment.
I agree with you, John. Can I just comment on this? But in our case, it's a little bit different. I'll be very honest with you. I mean, working with international partners, they will have an issue with that. At the end of the day, if there is a link, and again, going back to the point of trust, and unfortunately, when it comes to diplomacy and things like this, I mean, you look at each region, each country on a case by case, and unfortunately, in our case, sometimes with the East and the West, they are a little bit more conservative with the countries in the region. So, and we understand the concern. And so this is just, again, an opinion. So the challenges that Italy have probably will not be the same challenges the country in the Middle East will have, to be very honest.
Exactly, yeah. Because a lot of countries in the Middle East and North African region are still having very different local issues than it is here, for example, in Europe. We're much more conservative than here, and we're if, for example, just in the view of just any civilian, when you talk about space, they directly think about military or communication, or just the awareness itself, let alone the politicians and everything. The awareness itself is still it's still blurry for everyone what we can do with space. So we're trying to communicate about it. I mean, in for example, just in Morocco, there's a lot of a lot of programs, a lot of events that happen around like space, science, and everything. And also, like, we try to educate people, like for example, the UN Regional Center of Space Technology is based in French. The French language is based in Rabat in Morocco. But at the same time, I feel like even with the politicians and decision makers of the country, it's still blurry. Uh, and everyone like think space, it's related to military, to surveillance, to spy satellites, you know. So maybe like to try to do something that is just 100% civilian, 100 or like with academia and industrials. This is something that like the strategists of the countries, like of the MENA countries, need to focus on if we want something like cooperative between all the countries.
Uh, from my side, I want to mention that distinguishing between politics and can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yeah, so it is really hard to distinguish between politics and space. But actually, Algeria is doing a big effort to distinguish between politics and science, and actually focusing on the national priorities and regional priorities. So I just want to mention that, as you may know, so the countries from the region haven't a long tradition in space. So, and a lot of countries are really affected by the international views. So in Algeria, we try to feel our needs, to feel regional needs, to have a real capability, and we try to help neighbors countries, as for example the case for communications. So as you may know, Algeria share this communication satellite with neighboring countries, such, for example, Mali or Niger. So I think this is the main problem creating these issues between countries in the space view and in the space vision. And I think our actual priority, as I mentioned, is to build a real capability to fill our local needs and regional needs. And of course, cooperating with the West countries. All what we did till now, it is a cooperation between our country and other West countries like the UK or France. And we share our all data and all photos we take with the DMC, this disaster monitoring company, which is located in Europe. And yeah, this is all what I want to mention.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Now it's almost time to break for lunch. It has been a great morning, in my view. I did enjoy the discussion. I did learn a lot of things which I did not know before. It's never too late to learn, so remember that. And so I ask you to be back here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in order to be able to continue our discussion and go further into the program. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure you have enjoyed your meal. I hope you have not enjoyed too much your meal. And you are ready for an afternoon of intense work, which I believe will match what we obtained in the morning. We have now a second panel on space capabilities and socioeconomic development for the MENA countries, which I think is absolutely at the roots of the interest for space. We have 3 panelists. 2 of them are online. The first one is Mrs. Nouran Al Yusuf. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yes,
And
thank you.
she is a very peculiar panelist because she is a young lady who has a passion and would like to be the leader for developments of the awareness of young people into the space domain. We are very pleased that she is able to share with us her thoughts, and I am very pleased to offer her the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you for that introduction. The kid next door may become the next Albert Einstein. Your quiet classmate could very well be the next Marie Curie. And the teen you met at your local grocery store may become the next Stephen Hawking. Growing up, I was always told that the next generation of changemakers were all around me, that the youth of today are the ones who will revolutionize science and technology. So from the kids you see playing soccer after school to the stressed out college students, many of the people in your neighborhood, in your community, and in your country are enacting small changes in the world and will grow up to continue to change it for the better. But what happens when the kid next door is one of the 2 million children out of school in Syria? When your quiet classmate's nationality places restrictions on their future? And when the dreams of the teen you met at your local grocery store are constantly ridiculed? We are always told that it's crucial to nourish the potential of every child. But what happens when that potential isn't nourished due to circumstances out of a child's control? And how does the world, and more specifically the future of the space sector, suffer because of it? The space sector is one of the most rapidly growing industries and is expected to grow from 424 billion in 2019 to 1.4 trillion in 2030, according to the Bank of America. Countries like the United States, Russia, and China have always been associated with achievements and progress in the space sector. However, the MENA region has enormous potential to greatly contribute to space science and the space sector as a whole. Just this past year, the UAE launched the Hope Mars mission, the first interplanetary mission in the Arab world. It's a mission that focuses on studying the weather dynamics of the Martian atmosphere, but it's also rekindling discussions of increasing space science investments. And when you're investing in space science, you're also investing in the youth that come with it. MENA's space future is shaped by today and tomorrow's youth. Even when it comes to the UAE Hope Mars mission, the average age for the scientists that worked on it is 27, and everyone working on it was under 35. Youth and collaboration are the 2 words that represent the future of the space sector in the MENA region. Because to truly maximize the contributions of MENA to space science and technology, there needs to be increased scientific collaboration among MENA countries, so we're able to make use of all the resources available to us. But multiple MENA countries don't have space agencies, such as Jordan and Kuwait. But this doesn't mean that space ambitions are absent. For instance, the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Science and Kuwait University are currently the only Arab partners participating in NASA's SAM satellites. In addition, the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research works with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's clear that Kuwait is hoping to have a future in the space sector, and it's the youth of Kuwait that are calling for the creation of its space agency. In addition, Jordan's space initiatives are being pushed for by the youth, and this is to be expected in a country where the average age is 24 years old. In fact, Jordan's first satellite, the JY-1 SAT that was launched in 2018, was actually built by Jordanian university students. However, in spite of these positive achievements, the lack of a governmental space agency will result in a lack of space research funding and coordination and direction in future projects. Also, it's not just the lack of space agencies that's an issue. Several MENA countries, such as Libya and Yemen, are undergoing civil wars and don't have the resources to fund space activities. But this doesn't mean they should be left behind. There are many passionate youth all across the MENA region, and they should have the opportunity to contribute their knowledge to the development of space science and technology. This is why it's so important to have an intergovernmental space agency that all MENA countries can participate in. So regardless if a MENA country has a space agency or not, the talent of its people won't go to waste because of citizenship requirements for a space agency operated by one country. For instance, did you know that Spain doesn't have its own space agency? However, because of the existence of the ESA or the European Space Agency, any person from Spain has the opportunity to contribute their knowledge by working for the ESA. This same idea should be applied in MENA. Thousands of MENA youth today with limitless potential are passionate about the endless possibilities that the space sector presents. Their opportunities in this sector should not be limited because of their nationality. And to maximize the contributions of the MENA region, we should also maximize our efforts to find the best talent in MENA, regardless of location. Currently, the Arab Space Corporation Group does focus on exchanging knowledge and encouraging the formation of space agencies between its members. However, it doesn't work on space science research and technology development, and an agency of that nature needs to be developed. Most importantly, many students will be discouraged from pursuing a degree in space science if they believe there aren't opportunities available to them in this sector. Sara Amiri, the UAE Minister of State for Advanced Technology, herself has stated that as a young person, she wanted to pursue a degree in space science. But because the UAE didn't have a space agency or any development in the space sector at that time, she decided to enter computer engineering. Computer engineering and other STEM fields are definitely needed for the development of space science. But young people shouldn't feel discouraged from pursuing a degree in astronomy, astrophysics, or planetary science. But this is what will happen if we don't have a unified space agency for people all across MENA. There are countries in MENA, however, who are attempting to combat this issue by the creation of different scholarship programs. For instance, the Saudi Space Commission created a scholarship program that will fully fund students for bachelor's and master's degrees in space science, aerospace engineering, and space policy, and will guarantee them employment with the Saudi Space Commission after graduation. This program will create a ready workforce to take Saudi Arabia to the next stages of space science. The UAE has also created the Arab Space Pioneers Program, which nurtures the talent of people from all across the Arab world, from increasing the space knowledge of high schoolers to providing space science scholarships for aspiring graduate students. Pursuing a career in space science was seen as an unrealistic pursuit for a long time, but programs such as these are essential in providing resources and support to passionate youth. 108 million. That's how many youth are currently in the MENA region. 108 million dreams, 108 million goals and ambitions. Many of these individuals are the ones who are currently working and will grow up to work towards MENA's space ambitions. So let's make sure that their potential and skills are cultivated and not neglected, because youth and collaboration are the key to MENA's space ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that we need to inject some of our passion in our jobs. But the point is that given your age, the world is yours, it's not ours. We are just the leftovers. And you have to build the new reality yourself. And I believe that we need enthusiasm like yours and a deep knowledge like yours. I mean, I was fairly impressed by the level of details that I had no idea. So thank you very much. I learned something from you today. And I ask you to stay on the line in order to participate in the following period of question and answers. Thank you. Now it's time. Now it's time to give the floor to Dr. Hamed Baraka. Dr. Hamed Baraka is a clinical pharmacist, part-time, I see, a hospital manager in Alexandria, but I think that his passion is mostly related to space science, and he serves as the regional coordinator for the Middle East for Space Generation Advisory Council. Also, he is very active in the upcoming Ahmadi mission in Egypt, Marcel Analog Mission, in the International Astronautics Federation. Of course, Space Life Science Committee is another committee where he is involved. We have been discussing a little bit during lunchtime. The weakest part of any spaceship is the men on board, men and women on board. And we must be extremely grateful to the doctors who take care of this portion of the spacecraft, because otherwise it would be absolutely useless to look at the stars. The floor is yours. Again, 10 minutes for you, 15 minutes, as you like.
Thank you, General. Thank you for all for NATO for having me here. It's a great pleasure. So for me, as the Middle East is still one of the largest and complicated world and part of the world related to politics, let's say. This is what I'm facing each day as a part of Space Generation Advisory Council, SGAC, and doing our activities and operating in the Middle East. We are an SGAC, have been established more than 20 years ago, and part of our work is having regional workshop each year in each country, in one of the countries, in each region of the world. In the Middle East, because of politics and the tensions there, we couldn't have it except only one workshop that happened in 2019 in Istanbul, in Turkey. Why that? Because if we cannot have all our members in the Middle East to be delegate in all the countries. The case that was in only Egypt and Turkey by that time that can host all the countries in the Middle East on their lands. Now we have more opportunities coming in the UAE after more neutralization and more opportunities in the future. This is the thing that we are facing in the most challenging part, I believe, in the Middle East. Into politics and how we can operate there. And the other thing that once we are talking about space industry, and in my panel here, how we can touch a little bit on the socio-economic part in the Middle East and how we can operate that as well. So in Egypt and Africa, let's say in MENA region, we are looking forward how we can do our best use of the space industry for that. And I believe we can have operation from my perspective, medical perspective, for the telemedicine operation and how we can connect all the rural places. This is our trial in Egypt, how we can connect the rural places in Egypt with a good consultation services in Alexandria and Cairo using one of our satellites. And how we can operate after that as well in all the Central African countries as well. And if this experiment went successful, we are looking forward to transfer it to all the other African countries as well as in MENA region. This is one of the main focus of us now, as well as how we can the challenge part, how to convince the public in the Middle East region, or let's say focus as well in Egypt and North Africa. We don't have this huge budget to invest in the space industry. So once you are talking about the space, we got a very negative feedbacks, to be honest, from the public. Why you are the government and are investing this kind of huge budget in the space domain, and we have a lot of other projects that we need to focus. So part of that, how we can convince them. Part of that, how after COVID, telemedicine operation and all of this kind of digitalization of the world coming very, very necessary. So this is one of the reasons that we can negotiate with the public why we are investing in a space. Other than that, let's focus as well on how we can operate the medicine operation or the medical applications in a space, and how that could help us on our own problems and issues here on Earth. Space application and medical research in the space is very, very promising. Let's say we are doing investigating how we can give such kind of countermeasures and treatment for such kind of diseases that could happen in a space because of the microgravity, such as osteoporosis and bone loss, which is and muscle atrophy, which is already happening here. And we have a lot of especially on the Middle East, let's say on Egypt, once you are in the late age, many people are suffering from osteoporosis. If we could manage to have a good research and how we can end up having a good treatment or countermeasures that can delay the prognosis of this disease, definitely this will help us on the Earth and our populations. This is one aspect as well. And how we can convince the people and rely on that we need space as well. So once you are talking about satellite communication, all of that, it's very away from the general people and community. But for Egypt, we are more focused now to do some kind of experiment on the ground that we can show the people this is what would happen in the space as well with the analog missions and the analog station. So with that, we can use the best nature that we have in the Western deserts that we can use to operate the analog missions and analog studies, that we can make it very public to our population in Egypt and also the African countries, that we are doing that in a space because we will benefit from this in a space somehow. So we can also use it as ignition or a sparking for the young people to study STEM and to go for a space. This is one part. And the other part, how we can operate as well and to be independent in Egypt and Africa for the medical research in space by building the first Egyptian biomedical research institute that could focus on how we can do the best application for telemedicine program, how we can do for the first time such kind of analog studies different than the such as how we can do the bed rest studies, the dry immersion studies that will be the first time ever to be conducted in Egypt and North Africa. And this is what we are promising our people in Egypt and in North Africa as well. And as we will be hosting in Egypt the African Space Agency. So we want to invest more in our space infrastructure that we have in Egypt. Apart from that, by using all of these facilities in Egypt, we look forward by 27 to have it a reality. And after that, we believe that we will somehow, as a social responsibility, to fill the gap between the developing country and the developed country in the space industry. We cannot leave all the other countries left behind because the lack of as I mentioned, expertise, lack of resources, lack of infrastructures that happens in our own countries. So we can convince our expertise, our young people to stay in Egypt, to stay in Africa, to stay in the Middle East, to do their own research, to own experiment on their land, and not to travel abroad, not to immigrate. So we can convince them that, yes, this is the future for you in Egypt and the Middle East. So we can focus as well as such kind of immigration and this kind of stuff that we strongly suffer in Egypt and North Africa, as my colleague mentioned in the panel before. This is one of the main focus as well. As mentioned, the main challenge will be happening as most likely the politics in the Middle East. This is very, very, very challenging, and I believe the investment in Egypt and the UAE and the Middle East is very promising in the space industry, but we need to focus more on enabling the private sector in the Middle East and in doing and investing more in the space. In Egypt, we still don't have this good infrastructure and for letting the private sector to get into the industry, but it's happening right now in the UAE, very promising in Israel as well, and this is a very good point to mention, that can focus more and help us on enabling and private sector and the government to engage both of us in doing that kind of investment in the future that could end up like providing a good promises for like the employment issues that we have, providing good research opportunities for more focus in the telemedicine operations is very, I believe this is one of the promising projects in Egypt, because now we can also, we have some kind of startups that is operating such kind of applications like Visita and others in Egypt, how we can connect the telemedicine operations and the use, it's end up user, like let's say, of the space industry. That's my own perspective on the Middle East and North Africa. I'm very short. I don't want to get more in details about this, like space medicine and how we can contribute in that, but I'm very much looking for your question. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, I believe, well, your intervention focused on a very interesting set of subjects. I believe that in our audience today, there's no need to underline the values of space economy, the values of and the benefits which our society can have. But sometimes we forget that these benefits either are shared with other countries which cannot afford or do not have yet the capabilities, because these benefits, the sharing of these benefits is a kind of prerequisite for increasing stability, which is a requirement for all our societies. We should remember that whatever we do it for the benefit of our countrymen and countrywomen, and whatever we can do in order to improve these feelings in our environment and beyond our environment is absolutely well accepted, and it's a must. Now I have to give the floor to Dr. Al-Nud Al-Sabah. Is that the right pronunciation? I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with the Arabic language, and so you have to forgive me. Dr. Al-Nud Al-Sabah is the acting director of the NATO Istanbul Cooperation Initiative in Kuwait, which is one of the main pillars of the NATO policy in the Mediterranean, a pillar which was established not long ago, because only not long ago, let me be a little bit sharp, not long ago NATO understood the importance of the Mediterranean. Now this awareness is here, and today we are here because of this awareness, and so I'm very happy to have the Dr. Al-Sabah in this event. She holds a PhD in history from Barcelona, and she has a master in Chinese studies from the same university, Pompeu Fabra. So she has a global view, which is absolutely the typical for those who engage in space, where we do not know borders, because every place is very close to us. Distances for those who take care of space are not a factor. So, Dr. Al-Sabah, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I would just like to make a little comment that the NATO regional, it's the ICI initiative, in addition to the Mediterranean, which is another one. Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar and Bahrain are part of the ICI, which is the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative. Today, I'd like to speak to you about the space capabilities as an educational program of Kuwait. I will try to share my screen if possible. Just a second. Do you see my screen? I'm so sorry. I think.
Yes, it's coming.
Do you see up? I don't know.
Try again. Try again.
It's this one. What does
Okay, here we are.
Do you see an Explorer or my PowerPoint? This is my question. I'm sorry.
It disappeared now.
Yes, I have. I'll give it another shot. If it doesn't work, I'll just do it without. This window. Do you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to talk to you today about how the GCC space capabilities and where we are today in the GCC region with regards to the space capabilities. So our dear colleague here, Ms. Noura Yusuf, spoke about the region in her few words, and I do agree with her when she spoke about the region's overview. She mentioned Kuwait as well, the UAE. I would like to mention also the importance of Bahrain's National Space Agency and what they're doing in terms of education. Oman has also milestones towards having their own space agency. Kuwait has milestones as well. We yet don't have one. Saudi Arabia also has a lot of investments with regards to their space commission. So the region, when I talk about the region, I talk about the GCC, looks just the way the screen looks like. Many initiatives, a lot of investments. The UAE, of course, has the pioneer leadership today. You have Bahrain with their national satellite launch by the end of the year, hopefully. Kuwait has their own aspirations. Qatar has their own satellite. The UAE have several. Saudi Arabia as well. So it is a cooperative and competitive region. Now, when we talk about national space policies, I have taken these from several agencies, and they all have the same aspirations. So we all want a sustainable sector. We all want to have education. We all want to invest in our youth. We all want to find diversified economies. We want to innovate. We want infrastructure. We would like to have new sector skills, local skills. So what is the reality? What does it mean? Most countries have it top-bottom or bottom-top. Some countries have created these agencies and then decided to have the education. Others started with the education from youth to university level, then had the policy. For each country has its own policy. But what does it mean for Kuwait, at least in a very competitive region? It means that we have to find a way to catch up with our fellow GCC countries. With Kuwait's experience with space started in '99 with Kuwait University's collaboration with the University of Colorado to have a laboratory in the Science College or the College of Science. And they have been working on it and training students. And then we moved in 2016 to an initiative to have all public sector initiative under the supervision of the Kuwait KFAS, the Kuwait Foundation of Advanced Sciences, and then expanded in 2019 to have other stakeholders like the American University of Kuwait, the Ministry of Defense, and etc. which is the communication authority. And from the private sector, we do have the involvement of the US, specifically in the American University of Kuwait, raising awareness, having talks, workshops. And in the meantime, we do have other stakeholders that we can talk about is the Scientific Center, Sheikh Abdullah Salim, Space Museum, the Science Club, and their collaborations in Kuwait and in the region promoting the awareness of space. Then we have the Kuwait College of Science and Technology, which has a nanosatellite lab and have their own small nanosatellite launched in the USA with the collaboration of KSF Space. Now, Kuwait have applied for the UN Corpus on the 1st of September, and we are today discussing how to bring private and public sectors together to invest in the industry, to invest in youth and in education towards establishing a national policy. So this is just an explanation of the stakeholders that have been working together towards having the Kuwait Satellite 1 launch next summer. And what does this Kuwait Satellite project aim for? As we have mentioned previously, and many of my colleagues have mentioned, training, education, infrastructure for youth, inspiration to be innovative, to create, and to promote science and the science of space. Currently, we have 15 permanent students in the project. We have a boot camp of 130, and they select the best of the students there. It's been going on for 2 years, and the expected launch of the satellite would be 2022. The second project of the Kuwait College for Science and Technology aims to build a quite different aspect of communication and the importance of communication in the satellite project, and how it can be used in environmental or climate change and the protection of the environment, and also to promote alternative industries. So my recommendations in the research are, what we'd like to see is to have a high national level committee with public-private sectors working together in what we call a collaboration between both sectors to promote the youth education and awareness from schools up to university level, and promoting it as well in, as we call it, public policies in the government. So our mission is to establish a space agency or commission to build the youth and capacity to raise awareness. And why is this important for Kuwait? I'm not sure if the audience is aware that Kuwait has its 2035 National Development Plan that focuses on sustainable diversified economy, developed infrastructure, creative human capital, train and qualify national human resources, engaging the private sector into the national economy. If we are able to promote having a Kuwait space agency, or at least a policy towards that, we can achieve the 5 goals of sustainable development of Kuwait. So my questions would be for my colleagues here and for the audience. Do you think instead of just having a continuous competition, should we have a joint agency? Can we adopt a joint education program as the GCC and other countries, as our colleagues, both my colleagues mentioned earlier, not to be left behind, to use and be part of this educational program? And who would be our cooperating countries? Some of us work with the US, others work with the EU. Some of us do some training programs with India. Some of us does it with China. Some of us prefer in the region to work with Russia. When I mean region, I mean outside the GCC, I mean the MENA region. So if we want to keep everyone included in the region, in the MENA region, how would our collaboration look like? And I would like to hear your opinions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Of course, I personally do not have the answers to your questions. but I believe that the discussion which we will have later in the afternoon can provide you some hints. The only thing I can observe is the fact that we need to find the proper balance between the bottom-up approach and the top-down approach. Because for sure we need the bottom-up in order to raise the attention of our leaders, but then we need someone to put order in the activities and in the decision making. It's not easy because sometimes one of the approaches takes the upper hand, which is not good because we must always find a balance. But I am confident that in the next couple of hours after the coffee break, we will provide you some ideas which can be helpful for your decision-making process. Thank you. So now we can consider that the panel has concluded its task, its initial task. We will discuss with them later on, but now let's have a coffee for 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, the music is over. Let's go back to work. So we had 3 interesting presentations of a different kind, but very well focused on our subject. And I would like now to start a public discussion, of course, with our panelists ready to face the challenge of answering questions. Anyone likes to start? Too busy in having good coffee before, instead of preparing for some interesting questions? Please.
Hi, Helen here, and thank you so much as a lawyer, and thank you so much for your presentation. So I'm very curious, since there seems to be, Egypt seems to be, you know, having quite a focal and I guess pivotal role in the future of sort of space in Africa and of course in the region. What are your thoughts in terms of the aspirations? Because there's a lot of discussion about youth. I think that theme came out really, really clearly in terms of the populations, you know, in Kuwait, in Saudi, in Egypt. How do you think, you know, like the value creation could be made? I mean, assuming, you know, as a general Campari mentioned, that, you know, we assume the value is there. We assume that, you know, there is great reason to go to space or do space activities and exploration and whatnot. But from the more grassroots level, because you mentioned something, I think, very important but practical, immigration and also jobs. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about job creation. So how do you see that happening? Let's say from your country perspective, and then also particularly maybe a secondary view, like you know, what's the ideal scenario, what's the worst case scenario that you can imagine? Thank you.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for the question. And it's working. Can you hear me?
Working?
Yeah. So from my country perspective, Egypt, how we can inspire the youth and the young people. This is happening apart from the outreach program from the Egyptian Space Agency, which is what will be focused mainly on the first 3 years of the Egyptian Space Agency, which is already happening right now. How we can do different outreach programs, how we can engage with the media and the public through different channels of communication. They dedicated an entire team for such kind of outreach programs. This is what's happening right now. But apart from that, we also see the impact. It's not that huge impact that can change the public and perspective, and also to motivate young people to go to STEM or the space industry. And we decided to do some kind of actual things happening on the ground that we can see and invite the people to see and come to visit, which is analog stations and analog missions. We have a spectacular views in the Western Desert, which is very, very close to the landscape of the Martian one. And we are looking forward to be having such kind of missions by 2023 or 2024, where we can invite all the public and all the young people to participate on that. And also it will not be happening locally, but it will be happening as international corporations, mainly with the Austrian Space Forum, and also many participants from the European countries as well, which will put us on a very challenging situation with the military, which is we are working right now, how we can provide such a huge security for such kind of mission in the Western Desert of Egypt, because you know the tension in Libya and the instability which is in Libya right now, and the location will be very near to Libya and the South Sudan, Sudan in the south, which is both politically and from security point of view, it's not stable. So how we can provide the good security from that, and providing the missions that will take like 2 to 3 years of preparation for the different experiments that will touch on very different whiteboard range of topics from my area of expertise, human factors, to the engineering and to the rovers. So all of them will be invited to contribute to that, to get in touch with international teams and international colleagues. So this is for Egypt, and also having the African Space Agency in Egypt and pushing us to invest more on our own space infrastructure will provide more job opportunities for our people, and also to make the African youth, let's say, to think a little way from emigrating, let's say, to other European or other countries, to think of Egypt, let's say, as a good destination in the future for a space. Let's say, let's think of that, and as well as in the Middle East, as a general perspective, how we can do that. UAE is doing good example for enabling the private sector from going into that. Iran as well. I had a conversation with many of my colleagues in Iran. The private sector and the startups there is very good. Israeli Space Agency and the Israeli sector is doing the same. So we look forward to enable more of our young people to think of that. Also, we encourage our international partners to think of giving more opportunities, to give much more investment in as a grants or whatever what we can say it to the African countries, to the Middle East countries, to have such kind of facilities on the ground, on their lands. So we can think of that like we have some kind of issues with immigration and how we can keep control of that. But if we have a better chances and a better opportunities in the countries, definitely the youth and the young people will not think of immigrating their countries. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, my name is Malak Travelsilov, and actually I don't have a question, but I would like to congratulate Egypt for the efforts that they've been working on. I was invited to the Expo Egypt Pavilion in a keynote speech with the CEO, Deputy CEO, Professor Mohammed Khalil Iraqi, and I've seen the capacity building that they are working on, and the progress they made and development in the sector they've made comparing to the other African countries. It's really, really, when I see like that, I said there's a big future for the African country. And actually the theme of the keynote was about collaboration. So Egypt is really keen for collaboration and inviting all other stakeholders to do so, and betting on their youth. And this is very, very good comparing to other African countries, which is a little bit difficult for the youth to find their ability to express themselves and enter into the sector and finding opportunities, especially women. It's a huge development that you've done there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? So let me make an observation then. Because when we talk about space, we always talk about satellites. We talk about things which orbit and provide us services. We pay not greater attention to what happens on the ground, because ground stations are one of the vital points where cooperation between countries can be even more effective, because they do not require enormous investment. They require some expertise which can be gained through proper education programs. And they are the ones, the elements which can gather all the data collected in the space and distribute them to those who are in need of this data. So I would like to raise the attention on this specific point, because sometimes it's more important to have a ground station than a satellite. I do not know whether you agree on that.
Definitely, and I cannot elaborate more on that, especially as my area of expertise coming from away from the technicalities in the space industry. But I believe Egypt has a good infrastructure. It's not that perfect regarding the ground control stations and how we can operate and how we can connect to our satellites, more on that. But really, I cannot provide a debate on that from my expertise. I'm not a best expert on the satellite communication or the ground stations. I'm sorry for that.
General
Good afternoon, everybody. Davide Re, Director of the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. Linking to General Camporini question, I don't know if also Dr. Alanud Al-Sabah still online and Noura also as well. When I was in the Italian Air Force headquarters, I remember General Camporini was one of the top generals in the Italian Armed Forces. And we were providing a operational requirement for a space weather observation station. Because actually we were wondering and we were feeling that a lot of impacts from the solar wind and the space agents was provided on a normal nowadays activity, from GPS signal for SATCOM, for many applications that we just live with, and we have no idea how vulnerable may be affected by space let's say, elements and effects. I don't know if Egypt or the GCC countries also explore the same area of concern and research on this specific dam. Thank you.
For sure, for us in Egypt, they more focus on how we can provide some kind of the actual climate change, as we mentioned, some kind of providing a more data on how Egypt will be affected from the climate change, especially on the delta of the Nile, and losing a very limited resources that we have besides the river Nile, the green lands that we have that could push the government and to putting in a very serious situation how we can deal with that, as well as how we can also but this was not from Egypt directly. This was some kind of an idea from colleagues from Iran, how we can have our own, let's say, localization system regarding the GPS, why all the Middle East countries come together to have their own navigation system, and now we have the GPS and we have the Galileo one for the European countries. So why all the Middle East countries invest on that to have our own navigation navigation system for the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. It's very challenging for like the disaster management, let's say, for some other countries, especially in Iran. Iran is very vulnerable to the earthquakes and droughts, and recently they have been in some kind of wildfires as well, and for the first time that we have a severe devastating wildfires that happened in Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. So how we can also have such kind of good and like providing actual data on real time to the government, to the decision makers from such kind of our own navigation system, our own satellites. This is have been raised recently, how we can do that with some kind of proposal coming out from Iran, the Iranian Space Agency.
If I may, sir, if I may, I have another question for our youngest panelist online. I learned that you created an association on the use, I think it was the association about Saudi Youth Space Association. From the beginning this morning, we are dealing with the necessity of collaboration, the importance of education of the youth. Do you have in mind or a dream to have a worldwide association from the youth? Because I must admit, I'm very confident in the new generation. They are fully aware of all the difficulties in our planet, the problem of climate change, etc. So do you want just to stay at your level in your country, or do you have a dream to gather all the youths like you that are fond of space and fully aware of the necessity to collaborate? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, the main reason I initially founded the Saudi Youth Space Association was because I couldn't find any educational opportunities related to space science in Saudi Arabia. And, there wasn't any programs, even when you look at the college level. The majority of universities in Saudi Arabia don't offer anything related to space science and space technology. And, when I was able to sort of found this organization, I realized there was much more and many more youth in Saudi Arabia who are passionate about space than I thought initially. And so if I was able to expand this, in the coming years, to be able to collaborate more with youth abroad, that would be really, really amazing. Currently, because of COVID-19, the majority of, our activities are online. But we've already collaborated with, for instance, professors in the US, or when they give webinars to students in Saudi Arabia about their work. And that's really inspired a lot of young people to want to go into this industry, because you don't really see many people in the workforce currently that are involved in this in Saudi Arabia. And so I really, really hope that in the coming years, if we could expand this organization further and reach, more countries and more youth.
I would like to answer a question that was asked previously. When we talk about climate change and environment and collaboration between the region, specifically from the hottest country in the world, habited, we need to have readings, and that's what the universities are doing. They're trying to read the change of and the readings of the desert and the sea, oil spills and pollution. All these graphic satellite pictures and images are very important. So we do need to collaborate, not just for security reasons or protection of navigation, but also for climate change. And as one of the people mentioned earlier, that the youth are the drive for change. And I would like to extend for Nurhan, if she'd like to meet youth in Kuwait, I can help her connect with young education programs. And also Bahrain has a very good youth outreach. So do reach out, and I will help you deliver your message, inshallah, because we all have a common goal. I wish we had an opportunity and technology at your age as we do now. So this might be helpful to send out your message. And thank you very much.
I would like just to add a comment here to the general. As we are working together with the Space Generation Advisory Council, which is SGAC, I would also to emphasize on that, which is the whole organization is running by the people under 35, which is coming from all the people from all the countries, regardless like the politics, regardless anything. We are completely neutral. Also, thanks to SGSC, I know in this room, Rawan and Iman and Malak and as well many other colleagues. Everywhere we met, and you go to any city, you will find a colleague from the SGSC. So it's a great opportunity to invite Nuran to come to work as well as with SGAC, how we can enable all the young people in the Middle East to be engaged in the space industry as well. Thank you.
To add up with everything that have been said, like for SJC, the only problem is that we start at 18. So if you're less than 18, it's a bit hard to get you on board. But after 18, it's well, you're welcome to get in SJC. But I mean, there's other things that are floors, like as we have like the alumni of SJC, we can also maybe try to push towards something like a program for people that are before 18. And we maybe like, I believe like members of SJC would be more than happy to mentor at least those young people. And I mean, as a part of my national activities for SGAC and like also in Africa, I know that a lot of people are also working with kids and people that are less than 18 years old, just like around awareness, sometimes just like cultural projects on space, and to raise awareness and to tell them like, okay, and around astronomy, like in Morocco, we do a lot of activities on astronomy, and the maybe like the problem is how to get everyone together around the same table and tell them like, we are here also, we want to help you. Sometimes like it's good to create such events so everyone could listen to everyone and everyone would understand what's like the other is looking for and the other wants to achieve, because sometimes it's easier to take the experience of other people like that are older than you and to work on them and to improve them and bring that young side of it.
So I'm also an SGAC person, but I wanted to mention something slightly different. So last week was the Space Week at the Expo, and alongside many astronauts, they also had panels of discussion with a younger audience, like literally high school students. And what was really, really impressive, I was blown away by the thinking, the enthusiasm, and even the CEOs from different companies were saying. There was one young kid, he learned about 3D printing, and he talked about, you know, I now start my own business. He was 16. I do my own business on 3D printing. And I said to him, you know what, there's already a startup called Made in Space in America. They're already doing that. They're supplying materials for NASA. And the thing about innovation is there's no limitation. So whilst, you know, as those who, you know, go into the workforce, you know, you're told you can't do this, you can't do that, you have restrictions, whatever. When you're a child, or be it, you have a young mind, age may not be the issue, but it's the young mind, then you don't think of the problems first. You think about the idea and then how you would deliver it. And so what was interesting is from those discussions, you could tell that that's the next generation. I mean, you know, in the sense that, you know, what we have, what we're dealing with is what we've got. But then, you know, for people, you know, like you as such an amazing speaker and also initiator, you take it on, you take it abroad. And of course, the market will tell you whether you have an audience or not. And I think one of the incredible things is a lot of the states, because I work with entrepreneurs, they're all looking how to get all this talent. And I use Luxembourg as an example. So Luxembourg, I was in Luxembourg before and after they introduced the space mining regulations. And what they intelligently did was they were able to handpick, cherry pick some of the best top startups in the world. So when we look at iSpace, as we may well know, my colleagues here from the UAE, I also knew of them before and after they got funding. So they're the most well-funded space startup in Japan. But before then, they were nobody. So they had no name, they had no team, nothing. When they got the popularity, then of course was working with MBRC, doing the moon, exploration, all the startups that could see the potential. In fact, all the countries that could see the potential would open their arms, and this is also what the UAE is doing: is welcoming the startups to come to their country to set up the business, because you could see the trickling effect. It's not just an idea, but a business where you then employ staff, you then engage in other other startups. And the other thing is, a lot of countries that a lot of the innovators that we speak to, it's not about replicating Silicon Valley. No, it's about what is your unique selling point as a country, as a region, and optimizing on that. So that is really inspiring. So I just went on tangent.
To add up, actually, like as coming from the MENA region and coming from Africa, one of the main issues that we face as youth in general is the lack of opportunities in those kind of industries, like space. I know a lot of people in Morocco would love to work for space, and but like they don't know how, or just how to engage or bring their touch. Sometimes, like I was lucky to know like SJC. I go back to this point because it really was life changing, but at the same time, I mean, like the local authorities and the local policy sometimes lack of this angle of space awareness or like technology awareness in general. We see a lot of countries now in the Middle East and North African region trying to invest more in innovation, because they understood that it is the future. And if some had, like for example, like their economy was around oil or like minerals, and they're trying to go like further. But at the same time, so sometimes I feel like, or what's the problem is like we disregard sometimes like education as like one of the main first steps towards getting like those skills. And sometimes we have the skills, but we don't have the industry. So the youth, like there's a lot of brain drain. We have this problem, like for example in Morocco and North Africa in general, like everyone is all the engineers are going outside, all the policy makers are going outside. So sometimes like everyone needs to get together and create a strategy to make this ecosystem possible for like the next generation. And it is only good for like even the social economic development of each country. It is a part of, it's a new market, it's more investments, it's a whole ecosystem. So and also like one of the problems is like for example for space is people don't really understand. I mean, for them space is just like astronauts, it's the moon, like stars, but they don't really see that it is very practical for each one of us every day. So maybe like awareness, education, and also like trying to create a good strategy is what needs to be done. And also like we need to listen to everyone, regardless of the age, regardless of the background. We need to get everyone involved into that.
Yeah, in contrast with what you said about 18 years old to access SGAC, there's a problem for me. When I wanted to access, I was above the age, so above 35. And it was an issue for me because actually I come from the legal industry and I'm an entrepreneur. But when I entered into the space industry, it was difficult for me to be, let's say, guided, and I had to do it on my own. Then after some times, I came back as a mentor. So this is the thing. And there I know the struggle of also older women when they want to enter and access to this industry is really difficult. It is mainly a male-dominated industry. There's a problem with age. There's a problem with the how entrepreneur can access to the space industry, understand the ecosystem, and understand how it functions, and the internationality of it, and how to find opportunities in other countries and be there, because also there's an issue. I wasn't here with your presentation. I just came from the airport, but it's a problem for example, Tunisian women to go to find opportunity in the space industry in Europe or in the United States and so on. So that's why also we are a group of women that we are working in the industry trying to get others instead of just pushing away, because the incumbent before, and this is a reality and we highlight it all the time. The reality is where the older one, they don't like the newcomers, they call them, to be there and try to have opportunity. And here comes the awareness, here comes the government initiative and the civil society initiative in order to bring youth and older people. They want older women. I mean, I consider myself as older compared to you and to you, Iman, that and there's so many others, they come to me, is like, help me. I am, for example, a lawyer and I want to access. So the thing is like, how can I mentor that lady in order to do that? And I do that also for 11 years old and 12 years old and above, how to get into the space studies and what to do. So there is a lot of work to do from the civil society up to the government level, international organizations. And the thing is like, dialogue is very, very important. Trying to just cover the things and say everything is fine. No, it's not. And it's an industry that it is hard by nature. Space is hard by nature. So it's how can we move away from where we are right now to become the real multiplanetary species, which this what I advocate with all kind of aspects about it, whether it's like the awareness about space technology or the awareness about how to develop capabilities in human development and all these kind of things. So you are youth, you are there, and it's very, very important to find your spot there and to find the right ecosystem for you to grow. And also the other ones that they are not from the space industry that they want to enter and access, it's very important, because this is how the mentality a little bit changes from what we call cross fertilization of cultures, especially in business culture. When you're coming from a different industry into a new industry, what you're going to bring with years of experience and in entrepreneurship or in other knowledge that you gain into business practices. Thank you.
I'm Colonel Kotas from ACT. Well, I would like to make a question, but I would say it's the topic that you already mentioned. But we have already seen the zeal of all the panelists who are very young, and we are very happy about that. But my question is something different. I would like to ask the panelists if nanotechnology is a priority for your countries, and if the nanosatellites accommodate the needs of your countries. Thank you.
For nanosatellites, nanotechnology is not because it's two different dictionaries. But like for nanosatellites in general, I mean, they can only be beneficial for our countries, especially countries that don't really have good economy, like world level economy, because they're cheap. And they can be done by like components that are off the shelf, which are components that are less expensive than the ones that are already qualified. And they can be also developed in less time. Like before, like big satellites, for example, used to be developed in 5 years, 7 years. Now they can, if everything goes well, they can be developed under 1 year. So yes, I mean, I personally advocate for making nanosatellites more used in our countries. I personally work in the CubeSat and nanosatellites industry, so it's my day-to-day job. And I only see, it's true, like, I mean, they're becoming smaller and the lifespan is less important than it was before, but also like they get also like I feel like nanosatellites are also more inclusive in a way, because now like even universities can develop their own nanosatellites and send them to space, and scientists can get in hand data, just collect the data they want. They wouldn't be really dependent on other industrials. And also now in the world, we see that a lot of new space startups are more and more involved with the nanotechnology, because the bigger used to do much more junk than the small ones. The small ones are easier to the orbits, and they can easily come back to like the than stay in the orbit. So yes, and also like mostly for Africa, for Middle East and North Africa, I mean, nanosatellites are way cheaper to develop. Like for example, you can develop one U, which is one hand 10 centimeters per 10 centimeters per 10 centimeters and launch it for 1,000 euros, for example. No, not 100,000 euros. Sorry, I was a bit 1,000 euro, 100,000 euros, which is like very cheap. Before it was million euros. So it's one of the ways actually that I see that is good for the industry.
I would like to add on to that from Egyptian perspective. So for the nanosatellites and the CubeSats, Egypt is a very good expert in like has good expertise on that, and the current focus is mainly on CubeSats and how we can do that, and in Egypt in situ, and they even looking for how we can manufacture the entire satellites, not only the CubeSat, but the huge like big satellites in the Egypt by 2026. And even right now, they will be starting next year with a planet in Egypt, which have been funded by the Chinese Space Agency to do all the test before the launching of the satellite in Egypt. So we just like send the satellite for launching from Egypt. So this is the like that we are looking for in Egypt to manufacture and to all the like the components of the satellite in Egypt in-house, at least 80% by 2024 to 2026. So yes, definitely the CubeSats and the nanosatellites are very, very, very like important for Egypt, and we have a huge investment of our entire budget for the space agency are being spent on the CubeSats especially.
Okay, if there are no other interventions, I think that we can consider that the objectives of this panel have been fully obtained with further investigation in other fields, which is important because we are not talking about secluded chapters. Each chapter is linked to the other, and we should be fully aware of that. So I think that we can proceed now to the conclusion of this day, which includes some concluding remarks and wrap up by myself and by Mrs. Jana Robinson. Dr. Robinson, would you like to start first?
Well, first of all, thanks everyone for this very inspiring discussion. I think that I understood the concluding remarks should be just very brief in terms of summarizing what we have learned today, if I understand it correctly. And I think there were a number of important points made by all the panelists, and I tried to summarize them a little bit in bullet points, but maybe General Camparini can add if I missed something. So I think the first important point that was mentioned was that the space sector can only be developed if individual countries, high-level decision makers consider it a priority. So I think that it has been already visible in a number of the MENA countries, but some others still have a little bit of ways to go. Then again, the topic that we just discussed, since large portion of youth is in this region, we have to engage them because they will be the next generation that will drive forward the space sector in the region. Then a lot of discussion on space for socioeconomic benefits and for human security. I think that's something that each of these countries will consider as they craft their strategies, how to use space for all those issues on Earth, so to speak. Then again, how do emerging countries enter space responsibly? Big topic. How do you balance the cost of entrance to space? Of course, with higher protection, meaning of the space environment, the higher the costs are. So where do we create a kind of balance as a new country when we want to launch some assets? I really like the point on that, we all like to talk about collaboration, but again, it was mentioned it's very difficult to collaborate sometimes because space technology tends to be sensitive. So I like the idea of sharing the expertise first and see where are the connecting points of where technology can follow. I thought that was a very good point. I also like the point that was made on the first panel that as the emerging countries enter space, that first phase is gaining knowledge, or any grouping, not only a nation itself, but a grouping, that the first step is gaining knowledge. So we talked, the founding of the African Space Agency. So maybe that's going to be also the first step. How do you gain knowledge and network? And then the second step of the economy, how do you transfer the knowledge into business and university setting to educate your people in the country. I guess in the afternoon we talked about politics can not only enhance space sector, but it can also create barriers. So I think countries need to think about the constructive framework for their space activity so that the regulations are not overly difficult to create a good business environment. We didn't really talk a lot today about the nexus of the security side of it, and how do you balance security interests and economic development, because sometimes they can be at odds with each other. But I think we're going to be discussing that tomorrow. So I think that's going to be very interesting from that perspective. And also the point that you made on the unique selling points, I think this is really good, that sometimes, yes, we can learn how Luxembourg or other countries develop their space sector, but that might not be relevant for your own country. So finding that unique selling point, I think that was an excellent point that was made. I think to conclude, we all know that the cost of entrance to space is lowering with the launch. The cost of launch is being reduced, or we're talking about nanosatellite or CubeSat, which are enabling more actors to enter space. And I think those create great opportunities for emerging nations to select which of the technologies can be tested first for the civil needs, and how that they can be moved forward. So with that, I guess I will conclude. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Robinson. Let me add only a few considerations which we discussed today, in particular about the need for cooperation, because of course it's a difficult area where we find conflicting interest between different nations, different societies, in particular in an area like the MENA region, where we find so many different cultural levels that in a way sometimes believe that they are incompatible with the others. They believe it, but I believe that they are compatible. And the point of the collaboration, of course, is a requirement from the point of view of the scientific, financial, and industrial effort to go into the space and to exploit the space. Yes, it is true. The cost today are being reduced to a very interesting level. I read that now a CubeSat costs around 55,000 euros. Well, I can afford it, so I don't know what to do for, but I think that this is interesting. But this should not be a reason to reduce the effort for cooperation, because what is important is not the object which is in orbit. The important is the data which are collected through these means and which become sensible if they are put together. So if I get the data only from one objective, it gives me nothing. But if these data are put together and analyzed with the proper instruments, which cannot be on national only, then we can have the real benefits for our societies, because this is the final scope. We do not go into the space because we like it. I like it, but this is not the reason. The reason for our societies is to get benefits, to have a better way of life, to have something which we can exploit. So I believe that the concept of cooperation must be one of the main arguments for the future. It will require a lot of effort by our leaders, but it will require also a lot of effort by our constituencies, because they are those who push the leaders in the right direction. And I think this is extremely important. One argument which was not touched, almost not touched today, and I hope it will be discussed tomorrow, is the financial issue, because we have been experiencing in this period several strange phenomena. COVID, of course, the first one, but for instance, many countries in the MENA region rely on the revenues from the energy industry. When the cost of oil, the price of oil goes below a certain level, resources become less and less available. And I wonder whether this has had consequences on the developments of the projects which each country is pursuing. And I think that this is something which we could explore tomorrow in order to understand whether there were consequences by the COVID crisis and the financial consequences of the drop in the cost of the barrel for our scope. Now the cost of the barrel is back again to 85 I think it's today. Those who have shares of oil companies may be happy because dividends are coming back again. But we cannot plan properly unless we are safe on the resources level. And I think that we should make a reflection on that. So having said that, the weather is fine, the town is beautiful, dinner is at 8 o'clock, so you have 4 hours now to enjoy yourselves after you.
Okay, now it's open. And I'm sorry if I'm the obstacle between the beautiful weather outside, the dinner, and of course, this event. Let me also to welcome my colleague, Air Force colleague, by the way, General Didier Polomé from ACT. He works in Norfolk on the other side of the ocean. And of course, it was a long trip, I guess, coming here today. Tomorrow, of course, we'll be leading with Jose the event tomorrow morning. Welcome, Didier. It's a pleasure to have here. And of course, it's coming from Norfolk, from ACT, which is the Allied Command for Transformation. So looking forward for strategic policies and plans. Space is really an opportunity. It's really an opportunity for cooperation. We were delighted by the youth, for these people that has been here with us, our experts. This is what the hub is looking for. It's looking for connecting to understand with a regional perspective the future challenges, threats, and opportunities. We also mentioned that space is an opportunity to monitor our planet that has been so badly treated recently. And as you know, climate change is affecting everybody, can be a glue to better cooperate. So when climate change was identified as a threat multiplier, probably climate change and space can be an opportunity multiplier. And that was also an opportunity to have and share your thoughts, your expertise, your knowledge. And thank you to the moderator, General Camporini, and me and Dr. Robinson for her thoughts. And let me just finish giving just a sign of appreciation to the only person here present. And thank you to Dr. Nuran and Dr. Al-Sabah for their presentation. So, Dr. Baraka, was a pleasure to have you here. I know that you are leaving today, so that's why we're anticipating the event. And let me share just this sign of appreciation from the NATO Strategic Direction South. And we'll be looking forward in the future with you and with you all. Thank you very much. Grazie. And last point, as recommended, I would like to have you guys here in the front. We'll take a picture of this event with the background of space, which again is going to be a multiplier opportunity and the beautiful opportunity to be with you today. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.
Bene.